I know some of you, but some of you also may be guests who I don't know yet. I'm the team leader here at Keller Williams in Capel. And let me just tell you first off, this is an unusual class. This is a class I've never taught. I'm literally standing in an empty room right now talking to you guys exclusively online via Zoom. And this is a new experience. So hopefully we'll make it through this okay. I hope it's engaging, and most especially I hope you learned something today that maybe might help you with your business and also perhaps give you some encouragement today. So first off, you can probably see Christy Chumley. So Christy, wave your hand, everybody. So Christy, she's on staff here with us, and she's going to kind of assist me with a few things as we get started. So Christy, first off, have we started the recording? Because I do. Okay, good. So we're going to also record this because I know there are some people that may not be able to participate at this point right now live, but we want to give them the opportunity to do that. By the way, I'm just looking at my picture, and I stand like right there. I've got like a halo. Do I look like really angelic like that? Yeah, that's kind of funky how the light's doing that. Okay. Well, anyway, sorry, got sidetracked. But anyway, we'll get started here. So, so a few things to kind of go over. So first off, you guys, I can see all of you guys have that are participating right now. You've muted your audio, and there's one person there, John. Nice to see you, John. So there's one person in addition to Christy who has turned on their camera. If you want to keep your camera off or on, I'm fine either way. I will tell you though that in the interest of this class going well, and you know, I'm a pretty good teacher. I do this a lot, but like I said, I've never done this without getting zero feedback, you know, while I'm doing it. So there will probably be some times where I would like for us to engage and have questions, and maybe something I throw out there you guys want to talk about. So I'd like this to be interactive if we can. One of the challenges when you do Zoom though is everything else in the background, depending on where you're at right now, the audio can come in and it can make it really distracting for everybody. So I know some of you guys have kids at home right now that you were not planning on that being a part of your life right now, and other things. So we'll try. Christy's going to help me monitor the audio situation, and hopefully we can get some engagement that way. But if it gets a little too distracting, we may have to mute everybody out and play it that way. So we'll just kind of be flexible here and do the best we can. So let me start off a little bit by telling you kind of what I envision happening here for the next little bit of time we have together this morning. This is me as an instructor teaching about best practices on working with sellers in the listing process, all the way from the beginning of lead generation and attracting that lead all the way to closing at the very end. So think of this like right now, if I'm sure everyone has like seen a cooking show or like the Today Show or Good Morning America, when they have a celebrity, you know, Gordon Ramsay or somebody comes in and maybe he's going to make his chocolate chip cookies or something. And you're going to watch, or you know, whatever they're going to make. They're going to make their special recipe of something. And you watch them and you see all the ingredients they put in there and how they do it. That's just their recipe for making those cookies or making that item. It doesn't mean that is the one and only recipe for all of mankind to make chocolate chip cookies. So kind of the same thing today, what we're going to talk about. This is my recipe for working with sellers. So I don't want, if you're newer to the industry, I don't want you to take this as this is the one and only way to do things, because some of you have some thoughts that are different than mine, and that's your recipe, and that's totally okay. So we can both kind of work together and respect each other's recipes. I'm just sharing what my experiences have been. So I'll start off by telling you, if you don't know who I am or about my background, I've been in the business almost 10 years. In fact, this coming December 2020 will be my 10-year anniversary in real estate, because it was December of 2010 when I got licensed. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm the team leader here at Keller Williams in Capel. We're right outside of DFW Airport. I mean, just like 5 minutes from the airport, so very close, in kind of in the mid-cities area of Dallas and Fort Worth. And I've only been at this location for a couple of months. Before that, I was at a different Keller Williams office, which is not far from where I'm at right now. And that office, in fact, is the highest volume office in all of Dallas Fort Worth. And my first year in the business, I was actually Rookie of the Year in that office. Now, I'm not saying that to brag on myself or pat myself on the back, but I'm telling you, I've sold a lot of real estate. And so I want you to kind of know a little bit about just who I am and what I bring to this. But like I said earlier, this is my recipe. You may have some different thoughts and ideas as well. So we're going to work through this together. Okay. All right. So let me kind of lay out what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about, I mentioned a minute ago, all the different steps from finding the lead all the way up to the end of getting all the way to the closing table. And I need to adjust something on my Zoom here. Okay, y'all be patient with me. Perfect. Okay, so John got a question. What's your name? Is that for me, John? Okay, Chip Mundy, ChipMundy. So that's who I am. And anyway, so today what we're gonna do, we're gonna talk about all these different phases of working with sellers. And so as we go through this, there's some things that we all have different experiences. So I know a lot of you that are tuning in right now, I recognize your names. You're part of our Keller Williams group that I work with, but some of you are people who I don't know. So if we do things a little differently, that's totally fine. Now, Christy, if you could pop up the Sellers Bootcamp slide for a second. So we're going to test this out, make sure this works well for us. So she's got some, this is kind of a walkthrough. There's 23 different steps we're going to touch on today. Okay, perfect. All right, that's working. Way to go, Christy. So these are the steps that we're going to follow. And you can see all the way we're going to begin with finding a seller, nurturing the seller. We call that the cultivation stage. And you can see everything down below. And I'm assuming, Christy, you'll be able to scroll down when the time is right to hit, yep, perfect. Okay. All right, so cool. So here's the other thing I want to tell you guys that are watching right now. I've got handouts of all these things, like what you're looking at. You can take that off the screen there, Christy. I've got actual like PDFs of these. So throughout the presentation, if you want to get like copies, I can email these to you for later, so you actually have digital copies, PDFs. And probably you could either put it on the chat and Christy will pick that up, or my email, if you just want to know my email, it's Chip Mundy, ChipMundy, chipmundy @kw.com, and I'll be able to send those to you later. So anyway, so we're going to cover all these things. Also, by the way, we're going to have, probably in about an hour or so, we're going to have one of our mortgage lenders come in, and I want him to talk with us for just a few minutes, because if you've been following the mortgage industry, I know 2 to 3 weeks ago, we were talking about blowing our minds with all-time low interest rates. And we knew this coronavirus was a thing, but this is before we were really starting to feel the pain here. And so I know all the agents that I'm familiar with, we were encouraging everybody, go connect with your database. Let them know that right now is a great time to buy because interest rates are so low. And then obviously, stock market has been rocked. Our whole world has been rocked, and things have been very volatile in the last 2 weeks. And so you'd be surprised perhaps that interest rates here in our area are no longer at 3% like they were a couple of weeks ago. In fact, one day last week, they got over 5% for a little bit of time and came back down into the 4s. And so anyway, we're going to have one of our lenders come in, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and how we can work through all that volatility and give good advice to our buyers and sellers. Also, we are going to obviously touch a little bit on the coronavirus, COVID-19, and maybe some practices that we should consider right now as we try to do our best to still be as normal as we can, engaged as we can, serve our clients as best we can, but also do it in a way that obviously is very respectful and considerate of all the different variables that we're working through right now. Okay, all right. So first off, on the Sellers Bootcamp, the insert that Christy put up a minute ago, the very first thing we talked about in that cultivate phase is finding a seller. So when you're finding a seller, obviously that means lead generation of some sort. So this right here, this would be a great time if any of you are feeling brave enough. And by the way, we don't have a massive group right now, so don't be bashful. If you want to unmute yourself, Christy, I think can help with that too. But I would love some interaction right now from you guys. How do you lead generate when you're looking for a seller? I'm gonna let that float out there. Somebody give me something.
Well, for my personal business, I like using social media. I have a pretty good following on social media channels and do a lot of digital marketing for leads.
Perfect. All right, we got social media.
I call old expireds.
Calling expireds.
Yeah.
Okay, great, John. And how do you have a process for doing that? You mean you just like search MLS on a regular basis, daily, weekly, whatnot, and find expired listings and go after them?
What I've been doing lately, I have been searching the MLS and going about a year out. And of course, checking, make sure they had relisted. But yeah, just old expireds. Yeah.
Great. Perfect. Anybody else have something you want to add? Okay, well, we'll keep on rolling then. So, so first off, I think it's very important to know that when we start talking about real estate, I don't know about you guys, but when I first began my career, or actually, let me back up. Before I was licensed, as I was thinking about getting started in real estate, and then as I went to take my pre-licensing classes and take my test, all that time leading up to when I was actually licensed, so much of my mindset was I thought about things that really, after I got licensed, really didn't matter. I was thinking about things like how I was going to have showings. Would I have snacks in the back seat of my car for my buyers so that they'd be all feel like I was taking great care of them? What, as ridiculous as it is, what my clothes were going to be, just all these things that I thought about. That's what real estate agents do. And then I get into this business and I realized real quickly that none of that stuff matters if I don't have clients to work with. So I've got to start with, I've got to actually have people to work with. And so it's funny how I'm sure you guys have felt this way too at times when you talk to people and they talk about real estate agents and what we do and what we don't do. And sometimes there's this perception that all we do is we sleep late, we get up, we put on nice clothes, get behind the wheel of a nice car, you go drive to a couple of places, you make a couple of phone calls, you sign a couple of documents, you have a long 3-hour martini lunch, and you post it on social media that you're living the big life, and you get paid a lot of money. And I assume we all know that's probably not the way it actually works. So anyway, that lead generation, we got to think about that as the very first step, obviously, in working with a seller and how we're going to get traction in our business to have somebody to work with. Now, another thing I want to do, I want to give a little shout out to the founder of our company, Gary Keller. So this book right here, this is called Shift. And most of you may be familiar with this. Some of you may not be. But this was written about 12 years ago, back when we're in the middle of the Great Recession. And real estate agents, the entire real estate industry was obviously in turmoil because the housing industry was so shaken up at that time. And so during that time, there was a lot of agents that we're not sure what they were supposed to do. How does this look? We didn't expect this. We didn't see this coming. Because if you remember a few years before that, I mean, it was huge. It was the industry was great. A lot of agents could sell property very easily, and it wasn't a big challenge. And now all of a sudden, the world was shaken up in a way that they didn't expect. Kind of like what we're dealing with right now. So I was challenged a couple of weeks ago. I've got a business coach. He lives out in California, and he brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and he said, you should start rereading that book because the principles in there, even though there's a few things that might be a little bit different, like you might refer to a fax machine in the book, and of course we don't really use fax machines anymore and things like that. So there might be a few things in there that feel slightly dated because it's 12 years old, but the majority of the principles in there are very applicable to what we're dealing with right now. And so if you want a copy of that, hit me up, let me know, or send a message to Chad on Christy can pick it up, but I can also help you with that as well. But I want to give you guys an opportunity to read that book because I'm rereading it again now, and so many of the principles in there are applying to what we're dealing with right now in 2020 as we speak. So when it comes to, let's just take this to right now, because obviously lead generating today, like this week right now in Dallas-Fort Worth area, is quite a bit different than our typical lead generation. It's different than it was a month ago. It's different than it will be a year from now. So we're having to do things a little bit differently. So my recommendation first off right now is hopefully you're taking some of this time to really get your database, your sphere of influence, your contacts, however you want to call them. You're wanting to get those things in place, in one place, one system. It could be a CRM that you already have that maybe you're paying for. It could be an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, it could be a yellow pad of paper with names, phone numbers, and email addresses on it. I don't know what that system looks like for you right now, but you need to have some kind of system to where you've got everything together. At the very least, we've all got one of these things right here in our hands. We all got a phone. And see, those are my contacts right there. We've all got contacts in there. So that might be where your database is right now. So whatever it is, we need to make that's where we need to get comfortable digging into every day. And because of all the stuff that we're dealing with right now, I've got a really good script for you for reaching out to people in your database. So hopefully you're taking notes or writing stuff down. So you might want to write this one down. The script is, how are you doing? How are you doing? 4 words. How are you doing? That's the script right now. Because right now, everybody needs some touches. And when I say touches, I'm talking obviously virtual because we're staying 6 feet apart. But if we're texting, if we're calling, people need to know that we care about them right now. So today, right now, unless you have some kind of prior indication that somebody has got a real estate need that they want to buy or sell right now, more than anything else, right now, people need to know that you care about them, and they need that touch. And what we've been finding out over the last week or so, since the schools have been closed down and people are at home, by and large, people are answering their phone a whole lot more than they used to do. I think a lot of us, we get so much incoming messaging throughout our day with email and text and phone calls and social media chats and things like that. We get all this feedback that comes at us throughout the day, and it can be overwhelming. And probably a lot of us are used to kind of screening our calls. And right now, a lot of people we're seeing that isolation is already setting in, and they are very interested in picking up the phone and taking your calls. So first off, we want to just check and see how people are doing. And this is not a selling time. This is not going into your traditional real estate agent script like you might normally do. So number one, we want to engage with people and let them know how we're doing, because whether they need us now, whether they need us in 3 months or 6 months or a year from now or later, that relationship is what we want to feed and nurture, so that when the time does come, they are, we're the only people they think of when it comes to helping them with their real estate needs. So right now, just check on them, ask them how they're doing. And then if the conversation turns into something about real estate, that's awesome. So for example, and we'll check with our lender when he gets here in a little bit, but at least 2 weeks ago, I would have been promoting, hey, if you got financial uncertainty right now coming up, this might be a great time to consider a refinance. If you need to tap into some of that equity that you have in your home, maybe you got folks who have lived in a home for 8 or 10 years. Maybe they've got, 50, 60, 70, 100 grand or more in equity, and now they have job uncertainty. And so they might want to access that equity to help them pay bills right now. Now, we all know as real estate agents, if they're not moving, there's not a commission to be earned. But you know what? That's okay, because right now it's about us serving them, us helping them, us being somebody that shows that we care, and we're here to help them as best we can. Okay, so keep that in mind for how we might want to reach out right now. Second thing on our list on our bootcamp list for today is nurturing the seller. So we talked about number one is finding the seller. So that's how we engage with them. But the next one is nurturing. And nurturing is that process where if it's starting from today until 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, at whatever point that is, how do we nurture them? And so we want to have some type of automatic or routine or scheduled or maintenance where we are automatically following up with our prospects as we go forward. Now, I know I've got a system that is electronic, that will send reminders. It can go out via text, via email, and so it prompts me to follow up with people in my database. As you work with more and more people, you're going to probably need something that's going to help you stay on top of that, because technology today is so cool, because it allows us to have these things that trigger either ourselves or our prospects with things like, for example, I have a system right now that's called a monthly neighborhood nurture. And what that means is I can send to anybody, as long as I've got their physical address, if they're a seller, I can set them up, and all I need really is their name and email address. I can send them once a month an automated email that goes to them, and all it doesn't sell them anything. It just tells them, hey, here's what's going on in your neighborhood in the last month. Here's how many properties have been on the market. Here's what the average price per square foot is. It fills in, a couple of other metrics of details and things like that, but it keeps them engaged with me, so that they know that when it's time when they have a real estate question of any kind, they know, hey, I'm easy to get a hold of. They're already familiar with me, and they've got that constant touch from me that says, hey, I got a real estate question. Could be on anything. It could be, hey, my fence blew over and I need a guy to fix my fence. Do you got somebody, Chip? It just lets them know that I'm a resource for them. So consider something like that if you've got access to it. But if not, you definitely want to systemize your nurturing process. Okay. All right. I'm going to pause there for a second because I've been kind of rambling. Anybody got questions or feedback or an idea about any of that? And we'll go on to the next phase afterwards. But I'd love to hear from somebody if you feel comfortable engaging. Let's see, John, you're asking what was that system? Okay, so I've got a system called Command. It's partly a CRM. It's a marketing tool. What I was referring to is called Smart Plans, and that's the follow-up system. So I can kind of go into more detail with you kind of offline on that and give you some more info on that. Anybody else got any questions or comments about lead generation and nurturing? I'll pause for a moment. I'm going to get a drink of my awesome water over here, and somebody feel free to speak up if you have an idea. Okay, y'all are being very bashful this morning, and that's okay. That's totally okay. I told y'all, if y'all saw my Facebook post, I told everybody, hey, you can be anonymous. That's totally fine. But I know some of you, because I recognize your names. I know you're not normally this bashful. So anyway, I know the whole technology thing is a little bit different this morning, but we'll keep on rolling. I'm going to pray for you as I speak so you can build up your confidence and engage with me in a few minutes. Okay. So now let's say we've got the seller, we've identified them, we've nurtured them, and they say, hey, I am ready to talk to you about putting my house on the market, about selling my house. I mean, that's the conversation we all want to have, but it doesn't just happen automatically. We've talked about the first couple things we've got to do to get us that point, but now we've got somebody and they want to get engaged. So the next step, if you're taking notes, number 3 on our list of things, and Christy, you can pop that back up for just a minute on the slide there, is a pre-listing packet. So Christy's going to pop that up there for a second. Let's scroll up there. All right, you see number 3, the pre-listing packet. That's called, we're going to talk about marketing your UVP. So your UVP, that would be your unique value proposition. That's what we call the UVP, your unique value proposition. What makes you unique and different and special and better than every other agent out there? So that's your unique characteristic or trait, how you identify how you're going to be different than any other agent. The next one, LORE, L-O-R-E, that's another shorthand for language of real estate. A language of real estate is going to be essentially market statistics, market data on how either you or maybe your brokerage, your office, or maybe your entire company, if you're part of a larger company, how does your company provide service and get results for your sellers in a way that they can understand. So it could be anything from how you compare and stack up against other agents or other brokerages with days on market. It could be things like your percentage of list price to sales price, meaning you're looking for a high number on that, like ideally like 99% or above would be awesome. But you know, so when if you take a listing at 300,000 and you sell it for 300,000, well then you're at 100% of sales price to list price. So things like that. So that lore is just some of that hard details, that facts, information, and data that sometimes people need to see to help them make a decision. By the way, keep in mind also, as we're talking about these different things, we're going to hit on different personality types. And some of you guys I know have been in some of my training when we've talked about different styles and different behaviors and personalities. So let's work on the assumption right now. We're going to just make up a fictional seller, and we're going to say it's a husband and wife. So we've got 2 different people that are decision makers. Now, generally, one of those 2 people is really the ultimate decision maker, who we need to is the one we really need to win over. But the other one also is obviously going to play a large role because they're also a co-seller with their spouse. Now, when I'm working with people like this, I want to, as quickly as I can, kind of identify the personality or the behavioral style of the people I'm working with. Meaning, there are some people that are much more emotional, lighthearted, fun, direct. They like to move kind of quickly. They get easily bored or distracted. So I've got to stay on my toes. I got to communicate quickly and with energy, and like I'm doing right now, pick up the pace in my voice, lots of upward inflection in the way I speak, maybe even use more hand gestures than I normally might do. But I've got to keep them engaged. Otherwise, after about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to start losing them. Now, that's going to be some people. Other people, perhaps the spouse of the person who's like that, they may be much more thoughtful, reserved, a little more quiet, and they are looking for facts and data to help make their decision. And so keep in mind that when I talk about the lore, the language of real estate, that's going to apply to some people, and they're going to dissect every piece of data you can possibly give them. But don't make the mistake that everybody wants to see all that data. So some people, and if you don't know your seller real well before you meet them at their house, you might find out real quickly that which one is the one you need to be a little more outgoing and engage with them on an emotional level more, and which one is the person who you need to just give them as much information and data as you possibly can. Okay. So the other two things on that list were testimonials. So if you've got reviews or if you got on social media or any kind of data or validity from past clients, that's always very helpful to use to help you. And again, keep in mind, if you're a brand new agent and you're like, well, I haven't sold anything yet, well, then you can get some testimonials or validity from about your brokerage, about the company you're with. Or maybe you're on a team and your real estate team provides you that validity. So keep in mind, there's different ways to do that. And then the last thing on that list of the pre-listing packet is what I call the seller data form. Okay, so we're going to spend a few minutes on this because this is something that I really believe in. I did not use this as a brand new agent when I first got started. By the way, and those of you that are new, and when I say new, I'm talking probably like a year or less in the business. Notwithstanding all the craziness of the last couple of weeks that we're dealing with, I know for just about every new agent, you who feel like there is a ton of information coming your way and you've got to remember everything and you got to remember to say the right thing at the right time and don't do this or you might get sued and all these things that have got us really thinking a lot about, oh my gosh, there's so much to remember and think about. But when I was a new agent, this might have been brought up and it might have just gone straight over my head and I didn't remember it. But this was actually about probably 4 years into the business. I already had a team at that point, and I went to a training and they talked about getting good data up front and how much easier that'll make your transaction. So we're going to spend a few minutes on that. I want you to think about seller data as kind of like if we were literally building a house. What do we have at the bottom? We've got a foundation. And then after the foundation, the forms start going up. It starts to look like a house. The roof goes on top, they dry it in, and then like the carpet and the flooring and things like that, the paint on the wall, those are like the last things that go in. But we got to start with that foundation. And that foundation is, especially if you're on a team or if you're working with multiple people that are working with that client, that data can be very, very helpful because just because you as an agent may go out on a listing appointment and have had just an awesome appointment with your sellers and you were there for an hour or maybe 4 hours or somewhere in between, you know exactly what they want. But if you can have that data, first off, we forget things, or maybe you don't, but I forget things when I go to sleep and wake up the next morning sometimes. So to have all that data that I can remind myself, but then again, if I've got a team, if I've got other people I'm working with, so they don't have to guess and try to make assumptions, they can have that data up front as well. So the seller data form. So all those components I just talked about, that would be the pre-listing packet. Ideally, depending on the timing, it could be something that's a PDF that you email to them. It could be something that, depending on the timing, maybe you're going to have your appointment in several days. It might be something you actually print out, literally take it and hand deliver it to them. I'll tell you, that makes an awesome first impression. It shows your service, if that's realistic. If geographically their house is in a place where you could get it to them quickly and either leave it on their porch or have just a quick little chat at the front door with them. But this is all information that you want to gather up front. By the way, the testimonials, the marketing, things like that kind of sell who you are. The great thing about getting that to them up front is then when you actually come back in a few days and actually have the listing appointment, you're not having to sit there face to face and try to sell yourself and talk about your language of real estate and your testimonials. They've already been looking over that stuff for the last few days. And so they're already kind of familiar. They might have a question or two, but they're already familiar with those things. So, but let's talk about the seller data form for a couple of minutes. So Christy, if you'll put up that seller data form page, and you can leave that up as we go through it. Now, again, like I said earlier, when we first got started, if this was like a cooking show and I'm the celebrity chef of the day and I'm making cookies, this is my recipe for cookies. Your recipe for cookies might be a little different. So I'm putting this out there, and like I said, we can email a copy of it to you, but feel free to tweak it. You can change it. Your recipe may not look like mine, but this is what I and my team have used for several years, and we've tweaked it a little bit over time. But this is the thing: I would either send them ahead of time so they can fill it out by hand, or another thing that I've done is I've taken all this data, and I've also, on this form, I've also created a Google form, which is, first time you do it, it may seem a little difficult, but it is not tough at all. Create a Google form with all these same questions, and so that I can either email it or even text it to them, and they can fill it out. If they're very comfortable on their phone, I can just text a link to them. It pops up, and they're just going to fill out the form right there on their phone, hit submit at the bottom, and it's all going to come back to me right away. So this is right here, by the way, this is one of my first tests that I have for my sellers. They may be wondering, what do you mean a test? Why do you test your sellers? Well, the way I test my sellers is as we work through this process, I want to know how responsive they're going to be. I want to know if I send them something, are these the kind of people that are going to complete it and get it back to me in 10 or 15 minutes? Or are these the kind of people that it's going to take 2 or 3 days and 2 or 3 reminders? Are these the kind of people who, no matter how many times I ask them, they act like I'm asking, for their firstborn child? I mean, they're so slow and reluctant to do anything I ask. So I want to know that up front, because at some point we're going to be in a contract. We're going to be in an option period. We're going to potentially have a negotiation, and we're going to have a time deadline. And I want to know up front if these are the kind of people that move very, very slowly. I want to know that before we get under contract, because that's going to help me understand and determine what, in my professional opinion, should be the amount of time for that option period. Are we talking 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, longer? What are my sellers going to be able to handle and move quickly on? And how quickly are they going to be responsive to me? So keep that in mind. So that's part of it is me testing them to see how they're going to fill this out. Now, the other thing, and as we go through this, you're going to see some questions that I guarantee you're going to want to know these questions, but when you're sitting at a listing appointment, face-to-face at the kitchen table, this far from them, you're going to see some questions in here that I think some of you are going to chicken out and you would never be comfortable asking them. However, when it is on a piece of paper and you hand it to them, or you mail it to them, or you send it to them digitally and they fill it out, you would be amazed at how people will respond to whatever you put in front of them. So as an example, let's say you go to a doctor. You go to a new doctor, first time you've been to this doctor, and when you set that appointment, maybe I've got a doctor's appointment at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is just my regular annual checkup. Or it could be a new dentist or whatever. But anyway, you're going to a new physician of some sort. And what do they tell you when you set that appointment? They tell you, hey, please come 15 minutes early because we've got some paperwork for you to fill out. We all have been in that. And we go there, we show up 15 minutes early, and you check in, the little sliding glass door opens, and you say, hi, my name's Chip. I'm here for my 2 o'clock. Maybe they've got a little sign-in form or digital or something. And then what do they always do? They hand you a clipboard with this only has 2 sheets of paper, but they hand you a clipboard with maybe 10 sheets of paper and a pen, and they say, yes, please fill this out. And you go sit down and you fill out everything. I mean, obviously you're filling out your contact info, your family info, your medical history, info in case of emergency. But so, some of those questions, depending on what kind of doctor you're at, I mean, some of them get kind of personal. I mean, they can get you some really, some things that you would never feel comfortable another human being asking you face to face. But you know what? Because it's on the paper, what do? We just fill it out. We just answer the question. So think of this the same way. They're going to answer these things, and you're going to have the great information that you need as we go forward to have a successful transaction. So let's look at the form here. So obviously the first 1 or 2 answers there, just basic contact information. Number 3, why do you want to sell this property? Now you might think that's a ridiculous question, but you would be surprised, and trust me, this is coming from a guy who's had a team with a lot of different agents, a lot of successful agents. They would come into the office on any given day, and they were so excited because they were telling me the night before they were at a kitchen, doing a listing presentation. They came in, they got the listing. They're telling me all about where it's located and all the features of the house and how much the list price is going to be and how soon we're going to get on the market. And I would say something like, well, what is their motivation? Why are they selling? And these great agents oftentimes would not have an answer for me. It would be, you could tell they were making it up. They would look up at the sky and they'd say, oh, I think they're wanting to move to a different school district, or I think they want a bigger house and they want to move up. A lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times I would get really vague answers, and it would drive me nuts, because to me, that is a common sense question to ask up front, to be curious, to ask a seller. So folks, why are y'all thinking about moving? What is your goal out of all this? Now that's me. That may not be you. It may totally be you, but you'd be interested. It's interesting to find out how many people don't think that through as an agent. So I just want to know, what is their reason for selling? Number 4, you can see on there, if this is your primary residence, where do you plan to live next? We've got purchasing either pre-owned or new construction, if they want to rent, if they're moving out of the area, if they're purchasing, renting, or if there's some other response there. So again, sometimes people's situations change. And so we want to know up front. By the way, your sellers, you know, they're entitled to change their mind. And sometimes as real estate agents, we can get really frustrated with that, because we want to tell them, look, I've spent so much time trying to help you find what you told me you wanted. And they may say, well, no, that wasn't what I meant, or that wasn't what I said. Well, if you've got this, I don't want you to throw it in their face and say, look what you wrote down here 3 months ago when we first started this. But at least for your own sanity, you know where we started, and if we've made a change, why are we changing now? Maybe we initially talked about purchasing, but now for whatever reason, maybe financial or otherwise, they decide, you know what, I think I want to rent instead. It just helps give you that clarity. Number 5, now this is a funny question. Are you a first-time seller? So as real estate agents, we talk an awful lot about first-time home buyers. You know, you hear, that just rolls off the tongue. We do a lot of emphasis on first-time home buyers. We don't usually talk so much about first-time sellers. And I'll tell you, the first time this really was an aha for me is I had gone on a listing appointment. The sellers were I'd never met them personally, but we had a mutual friend who got us in contact with each other. These sellers were in their early 60s. I'm not going to tell you exactly what their age was, because I'm not sure, but it was, you know, they were not retired yet, but they were getting very close to retirement age. And I'm sitting there in their house. They've raised their kids in this house. And I looked at that, and they said, yes, they were first-time sellers. And it totally caught me off guard, because at their age, at their experience in life of having kids, what was I doing? I was making an assumption that, oh, I bet these folks have probably bought and sold several times. I mean, they've probably done this 7, 8, 9, 10 different times. But guess what? They lived in that house that they were selling. They had lived in it 20 years, and they didn't buy it until later in life, till they were in their early 40s. And I was so grateful at that point to have that question on there, because me just being who I am, I was going to jump right into making an assumption that they had bought and sold many times because of their age. And I would have skipped over quite a few steps in my presentation that normally I wouldn't do if I knew that they were first-time sellers. So that was a lesson for me of don't prejudge somebody just because you want to acknowledge or think that they probably have done this before, because I needed to treat them like a 30-year-old couple who maybe they bought their first house 3 years ago as a newly married couple, and now they're having a baby and they need to upsize and move to a bigger house. And I need to walk through the steps just like a couple like that. So that's a great question. Obviously, the next point is a great point on number 5. If you're not a first-time seller, when was the last time you sold a property? This is kind of the opposite reason, because sometimes you'll get a very, very high, what we call a high D, a kind of a dominant personality who will be very strong, and they will give you all the signals of like, hey, you don't need to go over all that with me. I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. Well, that's awesome. But guess what? I mean, and this is more relevant today than ever. The conditions we're selling a house in today may not be different than it was last time you sold a property. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, a couple of months ago, I would have said if somebody had sold a house back in 2006, and now they're selling a house now in early 2020, the market's very different. Well, like that question right there is more relevant than ever, because clearly, like today on March 23rd, if you're going on a listing appointment, the seller has different factors to consider that they would have never had just even a few weeks ago. So that's a great question, obviously. Number 6, and like I said, I'm going to email all this to you, or we're going to get it to you one way or another. Number 6, you see the question there? This is like the golden question before you start talking about pricing and comps. In your opinion, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what should the sales price be? Okay, so we're going to talk in a few minutes about showing up with your comps and your CMA, because you're going to probably do that before you go meet with them for the first time. But like if I know I've got the property address, I'm going to go meet them on Monday afternoon. I've pulled the comps, and guess what? Maybe I'm even surprised, pleasantly surprised, that I might have initially, when I saw the address, saw the square footage, I might have thought, yeah, I bet I'm just going to throw out numbers. I thought maybe that'll be like a $300,000 listing. And then I go do a little bit of do a quick CMA, do my comps, and guess what? Instead of 300,000, I'm finding out, hey, we actually might be able to get 325,000. So I'm going off. I'm excited because I'm like, I'm going to go give these sellers some great news. They're going to be so excited. Now that 300,000, that was just in my mind. That was the anchor. I had already put subconsciously in my mind that I'll bet this is going to be about a $300,000 property. So after running the comps, I find out, oh, it's actually going to be closer to 325. So I'm in a great mood. What if I get to the seller's house and I say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, boy, this is your lucky day. I've got some great news for you because I am going to recommend that we list this property for $325,000. Isn't that awesome? I know y'all bought this 12 years ago and the appreciation and blah, 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 blah. Man, that's great. Now, if I don't know what their expectations are, I'm just going to step in a big old pile of poop at that point because they may be looking at me like, what do you mean 325,000? We know we can get 400,000. The guy down the street, Bill, he lives down the street. He got 400,000 for his property. How dare you come in here? I mean, all of a sudden now I have screwed the whole thing up simply because I had my expectation. I didn't know what their expectation is. So let me tell you, whenever I would get this, whether they emailed it to me, whether they filled it out digitally for me, or whether they didn't do it at all, and the first time I'm seeing them, I'm handing it to them to fill out while I kind of walk through the house, my eyes always go to number 6 before I almost say any word, because I want to know right off the bat, in their mind, where are they anchoring that price, and how do I need to address this? If their number is the same as mine or lower, and I'm bringing them great news that I think we can get more, I'm going to present that in a way that really gets them excited. If their number is much higher than mine, and I'm realizing their expectations are probably not realistic, I'm going to frame that conversation in a different way. So again, the value of you getting that data from them right up front. Of course, in the next question, number 7, is, in your opinion, how did you determine that amount? And 9 times out of 10, it's my neighbor Fred down the street. That's what he got for his house, and I think I can get the same. So that's usually how they answer that. Number 8. So this is one of those sensitive questions that a doctor could ask, a mortgage lender could ask, but sometimes a real estate agent, they don't want to give you this information. But number 8, how much approximately is your mortgage payoff? Okay, I just want to know ballpark. And again, that might be one of those questions you might not ask face to face, or you might feel like that's a little bit of a personal question that you're not sure, especially if you're newer as a new agent, how to ask that question. So my advice, I mean, you could learn a script and that would be great, but if you're trying to remember too many things, just have it on your piece of paper and put it in front of them. And that way you'll get a ballpark of what their payoff is. That way you know if they've got really flexibility or not when we're talking about equity and things like that when it's time to accept a contract. The next question, number 9. How much approximately do you expect your net financial proceeds will be at closing? So what we know is this is just asking them expectation of what is their payoff, what is the sales price that we think we can expect, what are the costs going to be, how much is going to be left over that they're going to be able to put in their pocket. So that's going to, again, help us understand their expectations. Number 10. So this is a question that I recently added because we have this thing called iBuyers now. And like it or not, believe it or not, if they're playing a role in our industry. So number 10, in the past 12 months, have you requested or received an online instant offer to purchase your property from an iBuyer, such as Open Door, OfferPad, Zillow, etc.? Okay, so let me talk about this for a second. This is relatively new to me recommending this as part of a listing presentation, but do you believe that sellers, homeowners all over the country are bombarded with advertising right now of how convenient and easy it is to sell with an iBuyer? I mean, if I could say, hey, Christy, would you like to know how much your house could sell for? Get a quick, fast, easy offer, no hassle, no muss, no fuss. You'd be surprised how many sellers would say, well, yeah, I want to know the number. I mean, I'm a homeowner. I would like to know that number. It doesn't mean I want to sell my house right now, but yeah, are we all curious to know what our house is worth and how much we could sell it quickly if we needed to? My point is, a few years ago, before I realized this thing was actually going to catch on, I didn't feel too threatened about it because I looked at it as kind of like the We Buy Ugly Houses thing that's been around for years. But then I realized there are more people in this microwave society that we live in, this instant gratification, this Uber technology that we want to do everything super fast, easy, convenient, that, and it doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it's a real thing now. And so the best way to handle it is just to hit it head on, and don't dance around it. Don't just go in there crossing your fingers. Just ask them straight up, have you received an iBuyer offer in the last 12 months? Okay? Because we're going to address it and we're going to talk about that. That's going to be part of the conversation. I'll bet if you make this part of your listing presentation, I'll bet the majority of your sellers will tell you, yes, they have checked out. It's received at least one online offer to give them a price. Now, I'm going to presume that that price was much lower than they wanted to accept, and that's why you're sitting at the kitchen table talking to them. But wouldn't you like to know up front and have that conversation rather than being in denial and not going there? So my encouragement is to just go there. Question number 11, would you like more info about receiving a simple and convenient all-cash offer with no showings, no required repairs or improvements, no headaches, and the certainty, and boy, we all want certainty right now, and the certainty of a quick close date? So again, what you're doing right there is you are letting them know, hey, I'm a professional real estate agent. I can help you. Now, you might be asking yourself, why in the world as an agent would I want to help a seller with an iBuyer transaction? Well, let me tell you, an iBuyer, think about it, that company, that is literally the buyer. That's not the agent representing the seller, that's the buyer. That's the name on the other side of the contract. We as agents, we have a fiduciary duty to represent the best interest of our sellers or our client, buyer or seller. So if we have a seller client, our fiduciary responsibility is to represent them and their interest above our own at the highest level. And so the way we do that is we say, look, the reason why it's probably not a great idea for you to go with an iBuyer on your own, unrepresented, is because that buyer, that company, that large Wall Street funded company, they've got no fiduciary duty to help you, okay? To look out for your best interest. They're the other side, they're the buyer on the other side. They're wanting to get the very best deal they possibly can at the very best price. And so that's why maybe as your agent, maybe we get multiple offers from different iBuyers. And then after we look at these 2 or 3 or maybe 4 different companies, you know what? We actually may decide the traditional selling process, which is what I do most of the time, that maybe that's going to turn out to be the best results. But either way, I'm your agent as your fiduciary. That's what I'm here to do, is to help you make the best decision. Okay, so let's do this. We got all the way down to number 11. I would love to pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions for me or comments on any of the stuff we first talked about on this form. This is your chance. I'm seeing on chat. I'm going to open up chat over here. Oops, sorry about that. Christy, I may ask you to pull that up. If you can perhaps adjust the screen. I'm having a little challenge here. Just are there any chat questions, or anybody want to unmute themselves and verbally ask me a question on anything we've talked about so far?
I do have the chat, so feel free to put in questions on the chat and I'll read those off to Chip. But in the meantime, Chip, I have one.
Okay.
With the environment that we kind of find ourselves in right now with the stay in place order that just recently came out, I think iBuyers are going to even be a bigger question and conversation that we have with our sellers. How would you kind of broach that subject with a seller that has an iBuyer offer and that may be leaning towards that in today's environment?
Yeah. Well, so of course, keep in mind, everything is fluid, everything is changing quickly. Last week, and so this just goes back a few days ago, but last week, some of the major companies that we're familiar with, and I'm not going to list them, you can Google them if you want to, but some of the major companies that are involved in iBuying have suspended their iBuying operations right now. There's too much, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, these are mostly funded by either venture capitalists or Wall Street, or a kind of a combination of publicly traded or venture capital. And the environment we've been in for the last couple of weeks, there's a lot of people holding on to their cash. They're being very risk aversive. So first off, if you were going on an appointment today, you might have very few options, or your seller might have very few options as well. So again, that would be another reason why they need you as a professional agent to act as their fiduciary to help them navigate through that. I know, so I've got my real estate team right now. And last week, my team, we took a new listing and the seller wanted to get an iBuyer offer up front. So they did that. This is like Monday, Tuesday of last week. By whatever, Thursday, the company said, we're no longer sending out offers. But the offer did come in. It was like 40,000 less than what they were hoping for. So they clearly did not want to accept that offer. But what they did is they went ahead and listed in the traditional manner, that like a traditional listing. They still got a text a few days later from another company that had already publicly said, we are no longer making iBuyer offers at this time because of the virus. And yet their marketing department, the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. So they sent that to the agent on my team and said, hey, is this legit? Because I would like to check this out. And we had to say, well, no, it's not legit. It might have been an automated message, or somehow they're still being solicited to, because they hadn't quite shut everything down the way they expected. So again, one more reason why your sellers need us as agents, as somebody looking out for their best interest to help them navigate through that. Anybody else have a question or comment about anything we've talked about so far? Okay, let's see. Yeah, I see, John, you asked a question about emailing. Yep, we're going to send out the handouts. Perfect. Okay, everybody's good. We'll keep on rolling. Now, by the way, right now it is about, actually, let's do this. Let's do this. It's 9:51 right now. We're going to take a break right now. We're going to take about 5 minutes. Let's take about a 5-minute break. So if you need to, I know I could stand to go to the restroom for a minute. So if you need to go to the restroom, get a drink of water, check your email, whatever, let's do that. So let's see. Let's do this. It's 9:51. Let's say back at about 9:56 in about 5 minutes, we'll hop back on here and join us that way. So glad you guys are here. At times I'll ask you guys for some questions or comments. We've had a few so far. I don't want you to be shy. And by the way, you might as well start getting used to Zoom and things like this. So if you're camera shy or you get stage fright, just lean into it. Just get used to it, because this is probably going to be our reality for a little while. And you can go ahead and connect and just be comfortable with it as best you can. Okay. All right. So when we left off, we were talking about the seller data form, which is a tool that I began using not as a brand new agent. I was probably about 4 years in the business and realized I had a team, still do, and I had a team at that time. And I was realizing that it would be better for us as a group to capture all this information up front, and we can really give us a lot of insight to help us do a better job as a fiduciary for our sellers. So we left off at question number 11. So let's dive right back into number 12. And by the way, in case you hopped on late, if you want copies of this, you can send me an email, chipmundy, CHIPMUNDY, chipmundy@kw.com, or in the chat session we've got here. I've got Christy helping me out on this call right now. So if you just will give her a message with your email address, she can send something to you as well after the class is over. We got 3 different handouts. So if you want these, we can help you with those. All right, so we're going back to the seller data form. Christy's got it pulled up on the screen. Thank you very much. So number 12, question number 12. Another great question that you want to know up front, because you want this to initiate that conversation. Mr. or Mrs. Seller, number 12, are you willing to reduce the contract sales price of your property if it appraises for less than the lender required appraised value? Now, obviously, we want to price this property correctly. When we accept an offer, we want it to be a sales price that we know will meet appraisal. But question, agents, does that happen 100% of the time we're in contract? Since most of you your cameras are off, I'm going to do this because I know the truth. No, that does not happen. And I don't care if you only have an appraisal issue 1 out of 10 times you're in contract. That one time, sometimes the drama and the emotions and the tension and all the junk that goes along with people having to readjust their expectations, perhaps 2 weeks before closing, is enough to make you say, I don't even know if I want to be a real estate agent anymore, because man, that was tough and stressful. So what does this do? Because it's on our form, because we just asked them up front and handed the form to them, that allows us to get into that conversation. So typically, a lot of times what I would hear from a seller is, well, now wait, what does this mean? Will I reduce the price? They say, we need to explain more, Chip. What is that? What are we talking about? And that opens up that conversation. Now, I don't want us to get in that situation down the road. However, I do want that to be a factor in the back of their mind. For example, pretty soon we're going to talk about pricing this property. If I say it should be priced at 325 and they say we want 400 or maybe 375, and I have to have a conversation about, forget the fact that your neighbor down the street sold it for the price they did. The only way this will work is if we get a cash buyer and who does not need an appraisal. And even though that may happen, how likely is that to happen? Because the majority of times we all know that in most situations, we're going to have financing involved in this transaction, and the appraisal is a factor. A willing buyer who all agree willingly to pay a certain price for this transaction, but the lender is the one who holds all the cards, and that is happening via the appraisal to determine the appraised value. So that initiates that conversation up front. Question number 13, other than your mortgage, are there any other liens or judgments against the property? Those of you that know your listing agreements well, that is essentially a question in the listing agreement. However, I will tell you, on my team, I have had a transaction where the agent on my team did not go over that question carefully enough with the seller, and they kind of just blew through it because it's like, oh, that's never a thing. We just kind of fly past it. Once we got under contract, we found out this property right here in Colleyville, very close to us, they had over $1 million lien on the property because the seller, Mr. Seller, was in a bad business relationship years ago, and they ended it poorly. And what did they do? They just stuck a lien on the property and said, well, good luck trying to sell your property when that time comes. We did not know about that. And then, of course, eventually we did find out, and it really just made things very tough for us. So if we have liens of any kind, we want to know about that up front. Number 14, another great question about juggling contingencies now. If we sell your home in the next 30 days, will that pose a problem for you? Yes or no? Helps us know what is our timeline. And if yes, what would that be? Number 15, do you have a specific date you need to close, or is the closing date flexible? Again, it helps us get into that conversation, little questions we may not have thought about if we didn't have a guide, or a script or something to help get us there. Number 16, this is your leaseback question. Will you be able to let the new buyer take possession of the property immediately after closing and funding, or will you need more time to move out? So again, if you haven't done this before, if you're a brand new agent, you would be surprised how many people have different understandings and expectations of what happens at closing. Now, because they're a seller, unless they inherited this property, it was gifted to them at some point, we can presume they probably purchased this property at some time in the past. They've gone through a transaction, but whether that was a year ago or 20 years ago, a lot of times people don't remember how the transaction went and how that went in terms of when does the buyer take possession, when is the seller required to be out. And you'll find out all kinds of crazy things, because what do? They get on Facebook, they get on the internet, they get in chat rooms, they get in all these different places and get all this wrong and bad information. And some of you guys who have sold property for a while, you know what I'm talking about. You'll hear things like, oh, I thought that in Texas, the buyer legally had to wait 3 days after closing before moving in. Well, no. Now, if we have a seller leaseback, yes, that's the case, because that's a provision of the contract. That's an addendum that we added to the contract. But we need to know up front, is this something we need to work on? Or are you going to be able to move out before closing? And sometimes you got to walk them through that. You got to say, now, especially if they're buying their next home, if you're working a contingency transaction, meaning we're selling house number 1, we're moving to house number 2, and we need some of the funds from the proceeds of house number 1 to be able to close on house number 2. Now, I know for some of you, you're thinking, this is so simple, everybody knows this. But I promise you, everybody forgets and loses their mind when they start working with buyers and sellers in the middle of a transaction. So that's why we want to have this conversation up front when our emotions are chill and calm and we're not actually in the heat of battle of a transaction. So why do we need to talk about that? Because if you need the funds from house number 1, how are you going to close on house number 2? Now, you can schedule both of those on the same date, but let's think about it for a second. All the stuff in house number 1, if we've got to have all that moved out, and then we go down to the title company and close, where's all that stuff? Is all of it fitting on one truck? It's going to make one trip over to the new house? Is that the way we're going to do it? If you can do that, that's great. Most of the time, it's multiple trucks. It's not all cleaned out at once. It's a big hassle. So keep in mind, you're navigating them on, are they going to have to move twice? Or are they going to have to put stuff in storage? What's that going to look like? Because if your seller's intent is they want to close on house number one, and then they want to load up, they want to wait until after closing because they want to be sure, 100% sure that the deal closed. And then as soon as they leave the title company, they go right back home and start loading up the truck. And they need time then because they want to load up that truck and drive it across town or across wherever to get to their next house. They want to do that, and they want some time to have that conversation. Do you need 3 days? Do you need 5 days? Do you need a week? Do you need more than that? And as we all know in Texas, a lease back can be up to 90 days. And I'll tell you right now, kind of get off on the virus stuff right now, this is definitely a part of a transaction or a part of a conversation I would have with my seller up front. Because right now, certainty is not something that everybody has. So we would really want to find out like what gives everybody the most flexibility when we get to this point in time, 30 or 60 days down the road, and we don't really know exactly what it's going to look like. So that's what that question's all about. Number 17, what are your expectations of me as your realtor? That's just kind of a nice little question, and you never know what they're going to put, but it might reveal something you didn't expect. Next page, number 18, what is most important to you? So this right here, this is one of those questions that helps us understand, hey, maybe everybody doesn't think the way we think. A lot of times I know as agents, we tend to focus on the financial aspect of this because this is our income, and we think everyone else is thinking the same way we are, and that is about finances, meaning their net financial proceeds is the number one most important thing in their life. Now, I know for everybody that is an important factor, but like right now, it's pretty easy to understand. In March of 2020 right now, there are a lot of other factors in play. So I want them to know, I want them to prioritize on this little sheet of paper here, a 1, 2, or 3. Is it the highest priority? Is it a moderate priority or a low priority? Because for example, time, traditionally, I would see that a lot of times because if somebody has a job transfer, they're moving to California and they're starting a new job on May 1st, then time may be a big factor for them. Might even be more important than the financial proceeds. So just keep that in mind. That could be important. But look at the next two. Convenience. Convenience meaning minimal disruptions due to buyer showings or making improvements and repairs to the property. So maybe seller has an infant baby. They got a newborn baby. They just delivered a few weeks earlier, and they have nap time and they have things like that. And having showings is going to be a painful process for them. And they really, that's what they're dreading more than anything else, is disrupting the life with their baby in the house. Or maybe they've got mother-in-law or father-in-law. They've got an elderly relative living in the house. For whatever reason, they almost can't leave the house. And if they do, boy, that really takes a lot of effort to get them out of the house for showings. So that might be a large factor for them. And after we get through this form, we're going to go over some virus-related stuff, and we're going to address some of these things that are kind of current issues for right now. But needless to say, right now, strangers coming into your house, your home, is a factor. So we'll kind of circle back to that in a few minutes. But that convenience factor, that might be even more important than ever right now. And then the last item on there, certainty, minimizing unexpected surprises regarding the sales price, cost of repairs, or closing date. This is essentially the iBuyer question. Is if they tell you, look, I just need to get this house sold. I don't want to mess with it. I don't really even care how much it is. I just need to not have to worry about it. Now, a lot of times that might be something you would see if the seller maybe inherited the property. Maybe somebody in their family is deceased. They inherited the property and they like, look, I just need to get this house gone. But it may not be that. It may actually be their homestead where they actually live, and they just don't want the uncertainty of pricing or showings or things like that. They just want to get it done. So that's kind of your iBuyer question. Number 19, this is an interesting question. What will you do, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, if the property does not sell within the time frame you need? Now, this is also kind of funny because sometimes you can get an indication if your seller has a good sense of humor and they're comfortable with you, because on one occasion, when I presented that to a seller, they would answer the question, what would you do if the property doesn't sell? They would say, fire my realtor, and then put a little smiley face on it. Or maybe they did put a smiley face on it. Maybe they really meant it. But in other words, we're going to address it head on. We're going to talk about, hey, majority of my properties sell. If I'm going to all this trouble, I'm going to start writing checks and spending money as soon as we get this listing agreement signed. So I've got money on the line that I'm invested in getting your property sold right off the bat. However, sometimes situations come up and we don't get it sold. And I want to know what that looks like. Are we going to extend it? Are we going to reduce the price? Are you going to fire me? What is that going to look like? So let's just tackle some of those sensitive topics right up front. All right. Number 20, we're going to talk about pets. This is kind of your showing time, used to be CSS. These are your CSS or showing time questions, just so you know right up front when it comes time to input the listing, how to, what are the pets? Do we got, 3 dogs? Are they inside, outside? Are they going to be crated? Are they going to be kept off property, etc.? So we want to know that stuff up front. Number 21, kind of the same question about their security system. Again, we want to get all this miscellaneous data in one shot. We don't want to wear your seller down by calling them 14 different times with, oh, Mr. Seller, hey, one more question I forgot to ask you when I was at your house last night. Your alarm system. I forgot about it because I didn't have this form in front of me, and now I'm looking at inputting your data into showing time. I didn't ask about your alarm system. Don't be that agent. Let's be efficient. Let's respect their time. Let's get all this information up front. Now, number 22. Now, this question is more relevant than ever. Are there any video cameras or audio recording devices located on the property? Yes or no? If so, provide details. And they're going to put something like, we've got a Ring doorbell at the front door, or we've got a security system throughout the house that allows us to both capture still image, capture video, or audio as well. Now, I want to walk you through this. See that box where it says, please read carefully. Okay, so this is all, I've verified all this information, so you can feel free to double check me if you want to. But here is the law on this, and keep in mind, this is something, when I started real estate 10 years ago, this was not really a factor, but over the years, it has become a thing now that we need to be aware of. So as more people have sophisticated home video surveillance and things like that, here's what the law says. So let's look at this real quick. Audio. If a seller is not present, he or she cannot record audio, even if it's inside their home. Now let's think about that. If the seller is not present. So clearly, if there's a showing with buyers and the buyer's agent and the seller is off premises, the seller is not present. So in the state of Texas, I can record a conversation if I'm a part of that conversation. If you and I are having a verbal conversation, you can record, and you don't have to notify me. You and I are party 1 and party 2. The 2 of us can have a conversation, and one of us can record the other person if we choose without giving notice. However, a third party cannot record the conversation that you and I are having without notifying us. Okay, so keep that in mind. And that pertains to audio. Now, the second part, let's talk about video. Silent video, so no audio, silent video from security cameras is generally allowed as long as it does not occur in an area where an individual would have a reasonable expectation of privacy, such as a bathroom. So kind of a duh, we don't have security cameras in our bathrooms, hopefully. And here is the law right below it. The FCC, Privacy Act, blah, 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 Texas Penal Code, blah, 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 blah. It is illegal. Illegal recording is a felony offense in Texas, and anyone who has been recorded in violation of the law can bring a civil suit to recover $10,000 for each occurrence, actual damages in excess of $10,000, punitive damages, attorney fees, and court costs. Okay, so I know when I first started selling property nearly 10 years ago, it would be very common as I'm walking through the house, obviously with my buyers, I'm talking to them, we're talking about the benefits and features, what do we like, what do we not like, and majority of the time, if they found a house they liked, we would stand right there in the living room or in the kitchen of that house, and we would have this conversation about, okay, well, here's the sales price, here's what you're comfortable offering, and we might talk strategy and philosophy and things like this on how we're going to navigate the transaction. We would put it all out there in a way that we would never do if we felt like we were being recorded. And then what has happened over the last several years, now these recording devices are a real thing. So this class today is about working with sellers, but let's just for a minute talk about working with buyers. If you are a buyer's agent and you're showing property, I feel like you should assume you're probably being recorded in that house. Now, even if the listing agent has laid it all out there, described it all, explained the penalties and things like that that could happen, I would, as a buyer's agent, I would feel more comfortable about us going out to the car and having that conversation either in the car or not even at the front door, obviously, because that could be recorded, but like down at the street, somewhere away from the house so that you can have an expectation of privacy. Now, we both know, because we've just talked about this, they shouldn't be recording you in the house. However, I also know as a listing agent, if I tell my seller, this is what you could do, you know what? There are some knuckleheads out there that they don't care. They just are dying to know what the conversations are in their house. They spent probably a lot of money on their security system, and whether I've advised them to or not, they're going to do what they want to do. So just realize up front, you have covered yourself because you have had this part of the conversation. Maybe you actually even learned this today and didn't know it already, but you've had a conversation with them about what they should and should not do. Okay? All right, moving on. Number 23. Mr. Seller, how do you prefer to communicate with me about minor details during the listing and selling process? Text, email, voice, phone call, whatever, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, however you like to communicate. How do you prefer to communicate? Because if I'm giving stellar, awesome service to my seller, I don't want to expect them to bend everything to what's preferable to me. They're already having to be uncomfortable, do things that they don't normally do. I'm asking them to jump through some hoops they may not want to jump through. But what I can do is, if they are a text person, I can accommodate them in text about minor details. If they are a phone call person, they want to hear my voice, that's fine. It may or may not be my preference, but I will do that. I will call them every time and never text them. If they say, please do not text me, please call me. Because you know what? Some people might get offended about a text. If they're a phone call person, they may say, you know what? My agent, all he does is ever text me, and he doesn't bother to take the time to pick up the phone and call me and explain this to me, because for them, a real conversation means voice to voice, and that's their expectation. Now, the other thing about this question on our form is it leads us into what is a minor detail. Okay, so for example, to me, a minor detail is, hey, the buyer's agent just called or just texted me, they're going to be out 30 minutes late. Okay, is that all right? All right, that sounds like a minor detail to me. Certainly that would be fine on texting, at least in my world it would be. But to them, if that's like, no, I need to know, I need to hear from you. I never check my text. I don't even know how it works. Okay, welcome to 2020, but whatever. I will go ahead and call you when a minor detail happens like that. Now, as a listing agent, if we're in the middle of negotiations and we get some news like counter offers or accepted offer or they're backing out, you know, something that's like anything like that heavy in nature, obviously talking about repairs and things like that, guys, I'm going to tell you, unless they just say, do not call me, that's almost always going to be a voice-to-voice phone call or a face-to-face conversation. Now, if they say, just text me, I don't want to talk to you, okay, but they put it in writing here that they've said this is their preference. But, you know, there may be some times also you're going to have to kind of go around that and go, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know you told me you don't want to text. You want me to text. You don't want me to verbally call you every time. However, I feel like this is kind of a big deal and kind of an exception we should consider making. Can I call you? I promise I'll respect your time. I'll be off the phone in 5 minutes unless you've got more questions. But this is something I want to make sure that our communication is strong on. And, you know, generally they're going to respect you for that because you're respecting them and their preference to text or email or whatever, but you're letting them know, hey, this is not just a normal like, hey, you know, where's the dog or what time is the showing or, you know, this or that. This is like something a little more serious. Okay. All right. 24, buyer showings will be scheduled via showing time. How do you prefer they contact you? Again, these are questions for when you're setting up your showing time. You need to know that information. Number 25, permanently attached fixtures and accessories will remain with the house and conveyed to the buyers unless otherwise noted in the sales contract. These items may include, but are not limited to, light fixtures, mounting brackets for TVs, but not the actual TVs, garage door openers, curtains, rods, blinds, pool equipment, etc. So again, this is our exceptions page. So for when we're filling out the listing agreement, we got exceptions. This helps us have that conversation about making sure we don't miss anything that needs to be listed as an exception. So that was number 25. So ask them if there's anything permanently attached they want to take with them. By the way, TVs, let's talk about that for a second. My practice with buyers or sellers is I know the law, I know the rules, but I'm not going to assume the other agent on the other side of the deal knows the law and the rules and has communicated that to their client. So my advice on this, and just for clarity, when you have a wall-mounted TV, like right over there, see that? That's a wall-mounted TV right there. So in that situation, when people have that in their home, the mounting bracket on the wall is a permanently attached fixture. The TV itself is not permanently attached. So if there's no other information in the contract, what that means is at closing, that TV will be gone, but the mounting bracket will stay. So anytime when I'm doing a listing appointment, I'm walking through the house, I'm making notes on, do we have any wall mounted TVs? Because when we actually get into contract or get into negotiating, I want to go above and beyond making sure the other party and the other agent is also clear what's going to happen. That when your buyers move into this house at closing, there's going to be a bracket on that wall and not a TV. So is that what they expect? Or do they expect it was all going to be on and the seller was going to patch and repaint where the holes are in the wall? If that's their expectations, we want to know that up front as well. So we just want to cover our bases and over communicate on that particular detail. Okay. All right. Number 26, list any cosmetic upgrades or improvements made in the last 24 months. That's pretty self-explanatory. These are also, things that you're going to use for your property description, or you're going to highlight as you're trying to sell a property. Number 27, listing major repairs in the past 24 months. And so major repairs, we're talking about roof, foundation, heating, HVAC, water heater, plumbing, electrical, etc. Then number 28, any special features, which I would need to know about. Do you have a wall safe? Do you have a panic room? Believe it or not, that's a thing you see sometimes. Are there any things that I haven't covered at all, and anything else that I just need to know about the property? And finally, the highlighted part there at the bottom, this is always fun. Hey, valuables, jewelry, firearms, or prescription medications. Let's discuss. And this is always kind of a fun little conversation because they, usually your sellers are going to have one of those things or maybe all of those things in their house. And so we're going to have a conversation about what do we do with those things when it's time to have showings. Do we leave the jewelry sitting out in a jewelry box on the dresser in the bedroom when we're having open houses or any other time there might be showings? Or any other types of valuables. Obviously, firearms. If you don't have a gun safe, where are those items secured? Because we all know, we've all shown buyers properties, and buyer has 4 rowdy kids, and you got mom and dad and 4 kids, and they're running all over the house, and it's impossible to keep up with them, and you're pulling your hair out because you just wish these parents would act like parents and kind of rein it in with their kiddos, but they don't. And so the last thing you want to find out is, oh, there's a loaded firearm under a bed or in a closet or somewhere that could easily be accessible by anybody, okay? And then finally, prescription medication. Especially during open houses, you'll see this every once in a while. You'll see stories floating around where people who either are using or buying drugs will show up at an open house. They'll seem like any other normal person walking in. They'll go back to one of the bedrooms, going like the master bedroom, go into the bathroom, close the door. Of course, if you happen to walk in there and realize the door is closed, they're going to think your assumption is you're using the bathroom, but what are they doing? They're actually going to the medicine cabinet, see if there's anything they want to get out of there. So just be careful about that. Okay, we spent quite a bit of time on the seller data form. So like I said, we'll send this to you. Christy, let's open up the screen here. I want to know if anybody has a question or a comment, anything about the data form that we just went over. So this is your chance. Let's see. Hi, Shannon. I see questions over there on the side. Okay. Yep, we've got the handouts we'll send out. Anybody have a question or a comment about any of this? I'm going to get a swig of water. You guys feel free to speak up. Unmute yourself. Bottom left, I think, is where the unmute is for you. You can unmute and chime in. Sally, thank you so much. Very detailed. I know that's, so that C personality is the detailed person. I've got some of that in me. I try not to overdo it, but this is one of those times where it can be helpful to have a lot of details up front. Who else?
Hey, Chip, it's Cody.
Hey, Cody.
So how long do you plan throwing this form into the mix? Because I'm always scared that my seller presentations kind of drag on too long. So I try to send them a pre-listing packet to get as much of the fluff out of the way so that we can talk meat and potatoes when I meet them. So if I throw this form into the mix, is that something you think would be okay in the pre-listing, or is it something that you definitely want to sit down in front of them in person and add into the presentation?
Yeah, great question. And I know several of y'all jumped on since after we started. So earlier we talked about that, Cody. This is part of the pre-listing package. So I would send it to them. Either you could, it could be a PDF that you email it. If you normally do like a hand deliver a printed packet, that's fine too. And the other suggestion I had is you can take these questions and adjust and modify and actually create a Google form and send it to them in a link either by email or text. Because, you know, if you got somebody who's very, very comfortable with their phone, they love it that you just say, hey, okay, so I'm going to come over to your house on Thursday night for this appointment. Hey, I'm going to shoot you a quick text with a form for you to send some information back to me so I can do a great job and be respectful of your time. And so I just text it to them. And then, you know, maybe 10 minutes later, they filled it out and hit submit, and it comes right back to me. And so, I mean, that's like music to my ears, because I'm like, cool, I got a fast responder. I've got somebody who's serious about selling. They're not messing with me. And we got all that handled on the front end. So when I do show up to their house on Thursday, we can just dive right into the meat and potatoes, and we don't have to, you know, go over all these details face to face. If I've sent it out and they haven't responded, obviously I do take it with me to the listing appointment. And generally what I would say at this point, I've already sent it to them. They didn't fill it out. I would say, hey, so I got a little project for you, Mr. Seller. So if we can go into the kitchen table for a second, and I would pull it out, I would hand it to him, and I'd say, hey, can I get you to fill this out? It'll take you 5, maybe 10 minutes tops. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take a quick walk through the house. And majority of the time, they kind of get a little agitated or a little anxious, and they say, oh, well, I want to show you the house. And I would say, oh, thank you very much, Mr. Seller. I appreciate that. And I want you to show me all the details of the house. However, for you, right now, what I need for you to do is you fill that out, and I'm going to walk through the house. I'm going to make some notes, because I'm going to look through your house through the eyes of a buyer. Because obviously when buyer showings happen, you're not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. And buyers and their agents are going to be here. And when I can do that by myself, it allows me to kind of have unfiltered thoughts and make some notes, and then we'll come back and talk about it. And then later, I do want you to walk through the house and show me, because guys, usually when the seller walks through, that's like a 45-minute experience. And that's fine, because I want them to show me all the little nuances of their property. But I want to do that after they've signed the listing agreement, to be honest with you. I don't want to kill all this time up front, having them show me all the bells and whistles, and then we don't even get the listing. So that's the project I give them if they haven't responded on the front end to filling out the form like I preferred they do.
All right, thank you for re-explaining that for me.
Yeah, you bet. You're not the only one, Cody, that came on late, so you're all good.
No worries.
Okay, who else? Anybody else got any questions for me? Comments? Thoughts? Okay. Well, I'm going to assume you guys are with me 100%. Okay. So Christy, let's pop up the Sellers Bootcamp handout. So what she's going to pop up there, we'll go back over this. We're going to send this to you too, as long as we've got your email information. So we've only gotten down to number 3 so far. The good news is we've gotten over the hill, because that was a lot that we just covered on that data form. So number 4, now we're preparing for the listing appointment. Obviously, the things that we need when we show up for that appointment, the IBS, the listing agreement. We're going to do a quick CMA, and we want to have a seller's estimated net sheet. So first off, on the forms, the IBS and the listing agreement, depending on your brokerage or your company who you're with, whether you're using zip forms or DocuSign or some other format, you want to make sure if you're a brand new agent, you want to make sure you're comfortable accessing these forms. So if you've never done it and this is your first listing appointment, you're going to want to do that up front. Make sure you know how to get to them and you know how to e-sign. You might pull an IBS and send it to yourself or send it to somebody just to make sure that you're trying all this on a test basis before you're like in a real life situation. Then your quick CMA. So all you experienced agents obviously know what this is, but when you're on MLS, brand new agents, there's a feature called quick CMA. And we're not going to spend much time on it right now, because that would be like another 2 or 3 hour conversation. But a quick CMA, just in general, what I do in my experience is depending on the property. Let's just say we're out here in the suburban areas, and we've got a nice little subdivision. All the homes are built roughly at the same time. They're roughly the same size and same age and same, they're very comparable to each other. I mean, those are the easiest ones to do a quick CMA. You might do a search on just that subdivision and look at sold properties in the last 60 days. And hopefully you can find a few, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 that would serve as good comps. But if you've never seen the property you're going to, this is just a starting point, because we're probably going to do a more detailed CMA after you've actually seen the property and made notes yourself, actually been there. But you need to start off with something, because we got to at least get in the ballpark. And by the way, when you're at that appointment, be careful at spitting out an exact number. So like earlier, we were using the example of if I'm going to this property or when I first got the information, I'm thinking, I bet we could sell this house for $300,000. And then I do the comps, do the quick CMA, and I'm realizing, oh, well, we might be able to get 325. Okay, so I'm going to be very cautious about telling my seller we can get 325,000 for their house. Rather than a specific number, I'm going to give them a range. And obviously, the bigger the range, the more flexibility you're going to have. The smaller the range, you're going to put yourself in a box and make it tougher if you can't deliver what you said. So if I thought 325, I would say something, and I mean, it kind of depends on the situation, but I would say, you know what? I'll bet we could get somewhere between, I don't know, maybe, 300 to 335, maybe something like that. And I've given myself some flexibility there. Okay. So if I tell them an exact number, and because I really think 325, and then something happens and we can't get that, and then all of a sudden, we're having to reduce the sales price, the list price after we've gone on the market, and now it's 2 weeks in and we're not 325 anymore. I'm advising them to go down to 315 or 310. Well, then at that point, then they're like, hey, you told me 325 is what we could get for the property. So, you're going to want to think about that and give yourself some wiggle room in case you've got to adapt later. And then the seller's estimated net sheet. Almost all of your title companies that you're going to work with have apps, and you're going to probably find one that you enjoy more than others. But most all of them are super easy to use, and you're just plugging in a sales price, you're plugging in a commission that you're going to take, you're plugging in the if there's a HOA dues, anything like that, you're going to plug in just a little bit of information, and it's going to spit you out a net sheet. Because again, the seller's going to, the part of what they're looking for you is they're going to want to have an idea of how much you think that they can get for their house. They're going to want to know how much they can clear at the end of the transaction. And again, you want to be careful. You don't want to give them an exact number. You want to give them a range. So whether that's, I told you a while ago, maybe 300 to 335 might be a suggested list price. Again, if we're talking proceeds, I don't want to tell them they're going to walk away with $128,000, because what if I only get them $125,000? Well, you think, well, geez, Chip, that's pretty close. But you know what? That's $3,000. I was off. So I'm going to tell them something like, we're probably looking at maybe, I don't know, between 120, 140,000, something like that. We're going to give ourselves some wiggle room. Okay. All right. So that's number 3. So let's do this, Christy. Let's take that off for a second, because right now I've got our lender partner in that I was mentioning earlier. So guys, this is Mike Bain. So Mike's going to come on up here. And so, Mike, these are our folks that are watching right now. And some of these folks are agents in our office, and some are visitors. Right. And so I was telling them earlier, obviously with all the chaos and confusion right now, there's a lot going on. And so we're specifically talking about sellers today, but I wanted you to feel free to talk to them about anything from the mortgage industry side that you feel like they could benefit from.
Okay, fantastic. So as everybody knows, the market has been very volatile over the past couple of 3 weeks or so. Friday, at one point during the day, we were pushing 5% on the 30-year fixed, and then near day's end, the rates dropped a pretty good amount down to around the 4% range. Today, we're around the mid 3s, so rates have dropped significantly over the past, I would say, 24 hours, really about probably 4 or 5 hours from a market perspective. So if you have clients that are sitting on the fence waiting to lock in rates, I would seriously consider having them move forward with that rate lock at this time. It's been extremely volatile. We've seen shifts in interest rates up to 1%, 1 full percent, all within one day. Another thing I wanted to mention is the mortgage gallery is open for business. If you have clients that still need to be pre-approved, we are open. I would love to have an opportunity to meet with your client over the phone. Makes it really simple. We can have a 15 to 20-minute phone consultation. I can pre-approve them, run their credit, take a look at the price ranges that they're qualified to purchase within, and then turn them back to you so that you can still show them property within the confines of whatever the current market allows you to do that. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We're here again, we're open for business. We are considered, according to the city of Dallas, the Dallas County that is, an essential business, as we're in the financial industry. So we look forward to hearing from you, and let us know how we can help.
Mike, I asked him to take notes. So what's a phone number or an email address? What's an easy way to
Absolutely. Easy way to reach me would be at phone number 972-393-0900. That's 972-393-0900. Your client can also go to my website at MikeBaines.com to do a pre-approval application. That's MikeBanes.com. That's MikeBanes.com. Or by email, if they want to email me, is Mike@MikeBaines.com. Mike@MikeBaines.com.
One of the questions, so Cody just popped in a question
Yeah.
about title companies. I've been here teaching with you guys this morning, so I don't know the answer to this. Have you heard about title companies
I
and
have.
what they're doing right now?
I have. I'm getting a little bit of mixed feedback, but I've spoken with 2 title companies. One, wasn't quite sure based on yesterday's report from Dallas County, but title companies are in the insurance business, which is considered financial by nature. And keep in mind, title companies also wire hundreds of thousands of dollars on a daily basis. I got to believe that's financial by nature. I had one other manager of a title company say they are definitely in the financial industry and will also be open for business. Now, that being said, what's interesting is the way that some of these title companies are going about their closings. For example, I had a closing last week where the buyer actually drove up in the parking lot. The closer was in their conference room inside with the buyer outside. They had remote, I guess, access through phone, through their cell phone, and were able to sign in their car. So you're going to see more and more things like that during the current times that we're in. So you might check with your title company to see what their new policies are. Chip.
Okay. Perfect. Anybody else, if you want to, you can unmute yourself and ask a question or throw it up on the chat. We'll give Mike just another couple of seconds here, or otherwise we'll let him go. Anybody got anything else you want to throw Mike's way right now? This is your opportunity.
Hello, Mike. This is there like any documentation that would allow us to post about the new rates so that we are giving consumers the correct information?
Yeah, I'm very cautious to post rates, Sheila, because they shift so much. I'm not one to advertise interest rates because your clients, various clients have various type mortgage products, various interest rates based on their credit. So I don't usually post rates. If your client will call me, then I can usually within about 5 minutes get a feel for their specific scenario, and then I can quote what current market rates are. Obviously, they're not locking in, but it gives them a feel for their specific situation and what the rate might be. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But yeah, I don't usually post rates because the clients there's such a significant difference in the types of clients that are buyers that are out there.
All right, thank you.
Right. Yep. Anybody else got a question for Mike?
Say one more thing.
Yep. Go for it.
Keep in mind, guys, that a lot of companies right now are going to be slower in closing transactions. I want you to know that we are still able to close in 30 days or less. Underwriting times are a little bit backed up in some cases because of the number of refinances that occurred in the past few weeks, but we are still able to get your transactions, your purchases closed within 30 days or even less in some cases, depending on depending on the type of buyer. So just let us know how we can help. We'd love to have an opportunity to work with you and your buyers. And we are open for business.
Mike, I have one
Thanks,
other.
Chip. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, thanks, y'all.
Chip, can you grab Mike?
Oh, we got
I
one
think
more question.
Yeah, I think he needs to talk a little bit about the refinance that we've got going on right now. I think a lot of people we're hearing are being laid off from their jobs, maybe wanting to get home equity out of their house.
So refi to get
So
equity. Yep.
can Mike talk a little
Yep.
bit about refinance and what we can kind of share with our clients if they're in that situation?
Okay, keep in mind that if somebody is laid off from their job, unfortunately, what's going to happen before closing is we do what's called a verification of employment. So job stability is still important in terms of maintaining the approval on that file. In terms of the type of refinances, we are still doing a lot of refinances now that rates have scaled back to mid threes and with a higher loan amount, maybe even a little better than that. The refinance market's going to kick back into gear again. So, in terms of home equity transactions, there are probably half of my buyers right now are considering taking cash out for various reasons. Some want to invest in the market, some want to buy investment properties and leverage while the rates are low. But there's various degrees of interest in refinancing for various interests. So again, refinances are a significant part of our business when rates drop the way they have. And just reach out to your clients and let them know that it doesn't hurt to get a quote because we provide free mortgage quotes. It's pretty simple for me to put together an itemized summary of that transaction and just so they can make the best decision for them and their family.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Christy.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it, man. Okay. So guys, he is working hard. His job is quite difficult right now, just like all of us. So so it's great to have great partners like that that are in it to win it with us. So, okay. All right. So let's go back to our regularly scheduled program. We were back on the Sellers Bootcamp page. So Christy, if you could pull that up. We got through number 4. We were talking about preparing for the listing appointment. Now let's talk about the listing appointment. Now it's the big day. We show up at the property. We're going to, here's some of the items we're going to do. We're obviously going to walk the property. And, you know, I mentioned earlier, my preference, if I can do this, is I usually want to make one walkthrough by myself without them whispering in my ear all the things they've done, because that's going to take a lot longer. Most of the time I can do that walkthrough in 5 or 10 minutes and get some of the essential details that I need to know. Let me give you kind of a hack, a pro tip here that I would often use. So normally kind of my tools of the trade is I would have like a legal pad of paper and a pen. And let's just assume this is my pad of paper for a minute. By the way, can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear that background noise, or y'all good? Y'all good, Christy? Can y'all hear background noise? Okay, just fine. We got some noisy people here. Okay, thanks, Cody. Perfect. So anyway, when I'm doing a walkthrough, I've got my legal pad of paper, and what I do is, as I'm walking through and making notes, everything that I feel is a positive, a good thing, a feature, a benefit, I'm just making a note up here at the top of the page. If I see something that's a negative, like maybe there's a foul odor, or maybe there's something that's dirty or needs to be addressed, I'm going to make that same note down here at the bottom of my page. Because what's going to happen is after I do my little walkthrough, I'm going to find myself sitting at the kitchen table. They're probably going to be able to glance and see my notes. And I want to be able to glance down real quickly, depending on which way the conversation is going. And if I'm needing to give them extra encouragement and positive, like if they're thinking, oh, there's going to be so much work to get this house together, ready for, I don't know if we're ready for all this. I'm probably going to focus on some of the positive stuff at the top to encourage them of like, hey, this is great. Now, if they think their house is pristine and awesome, and like, who wouldn't want to overpay for this house? I might need to bring them down to reality and go, yeah, but you know what? Somebody in this house is a smoker, and this house smells like cigarette smoke. Or you got cats, and you know, you might love cats, you might not love them, but a lot of people, if you can smell the cats, that's going to be a factor. So I might need to hit them with some stuff down here. But the fact is, I got them quickly on my notes. I can kind of quickly go to my positives and down here to my negatives as needed. Okay. All right. So listing appointment, we're obviously going to review the seller data form that we went through earlier. We're going to review the CMA, and we're going to discuss our marketing strategy. That's hopefully you've already got that predetermined, what your strategy looks like. Do we just, you know, put it on the MLS and pray somebody buys it, or are we going to do a little bit more than that? So hopefully you've got a bigger plan than just putting on MLS and praying. So anyway, that's when you're going to outline that. But like Cody mentioned earlier, because we've already did so much on the front end of with our pre-listing packet, it's not impossible that you're in and out of that property in an hour or less. Okay. So if you're an agent right now and your listing appointments are 3 and 4 hours, or even an hour and a half to 2 hours, if they're longer and you want to make them more efficient, a lot of times it's how you build that foundation of the pre-listing that's going to set you up for quicker listing appointments once you're actually in front of the client face to face. And then obviously number 6, it's the magic time, sign the listing agreement. Okay. So a little bit of scripting for you. You know, I told you earlier when we're lead generating right now, I got this really complicated script, 4 words. How are you doing? Okay. It's about the same here. It's sign the agreement. Three simple words, sign the agreement. And by the way, that's a downward inflection, the way I'm speaking it. If I'm not saying sign the agreement like a question, because if I go up, it sounds like a question. If you're authoritative and you have a downward inflection in your speech, it doesn't mean you're being a jerk, but it's the same voice you say to your kids when you say, clean your room. Okay, get in the car. It's time to go. It's just, you're giving direction. And sometimes if you're not used to this, if that doesn't feel normal and natural to you, you may need to practice it with somebody. It doesn't have to be somebody in real estate, just be somebody that's willing to help you out and go, okay, I was on this webinar thing Monday morning, and one of the ahas I got out of this was I realized I need to work on my downward inflection a little bit because I'm not comfortable just telling somebody what to do. Okay. So keep that in mind. That may be something that you need to work on or brush up on your skills. I think I just saw in the chat somebody asked a question, but let's see if I've got it here.
It's me, Chip. Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Awesome. So having them sign the listing agreement right there on the spot, what if, so you have to have determined the sales price then, because on the listing agreement, you can't put the range. So if you give them a range and they say, okay, well, I need to kind of marinate in that and let me decide, you know, can you then just have them just like put a number in there and then have them initial the change later, or?
Yeah, so that would be what I would do. My preference, so I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to tell you what what I'm going for, and then kind of if I have to crawl back and accept some things that I really prefer not to, but it's the second best or the third best outcome. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to get all the blanks filled in, and if we are kind of at an impasse over the price, I'm going to say, here's what let's do. Let's go ahead and fill in this agreement right now. And all the blanks are filled in. And like you just mentioned, Shannon, we can always amend this price later. Now, clearly, we're going to go for my highest price first, because I know if I go lower to the price they want, it's going to be nearly impossible to drag them up. I'm sorry, I got that backwards. I'm going to give them the lower price. Sorry about that. I'm going to give them the price that that I think it should be. But if they want it to be higher, then we can amend that and change it later and go up higher. But I want to get out of there with a fully signed listing agreement and let them know. I mean, you might even have a hard copy, a paper copy of an amendment that you can go ahead and fill out if you want, and just say, look, we'll have this ready to go if we need it. And they could sign it. You don't have to sign it, but you could have that as a backup if you needed to. But ideally, the best thing is we want to have that filled out completely. Now, I have been on listing appointments before where I couldn't get them to agree to that. And I had to walk out of there with a signed listing agreement and a big fat blank on the sales price, or sometimes even on the listing date. You know, we might be working through negotiating out the term. You know, are we doing this for 6 months or something different than that? I've done that. I don't like doing that because that's still, we really don't have a legally binding document at that time because it's not fully executed. So, but I know sometimes you got to take it in baby steps. So just realize the highest and best is get that thing filled out. And if we've got to adjust later, we can always amend it as necessary. So anybody else have a question on that topic? All right, we're going to move along then. So I'll tell you what, let's see, it is what time? 10:50, 10:47. Let's take about 5 quick minutes. This will be our final break. So we'll come back at about 10:52. And we're not, I can almost tell you right now, we're not going to go all the way till noon. We're going to start making a lot of progress and go through things pretty quickly and be able to answer questions. But let's take a few minutes break and we'll get started back in about 5 minutes. Okay? Thanks, y'all. Almost always, I mean, I guess rarely you might have that situation where you've got a perfectly staged property, but you know, normally you're giving them some projects and some assignments of things that they need to work on. So that might be a thing, but you know, most of the time you've got stuff, a hit list of things for them to work on. And you know, that might be something that might take a couple of days. It might take a few weeks or longer. So by the way, on that listing agreement, I didn't have this in the notes, but you do know that according to the listing agreement in Texas, if you check that first box, you're indicating that you'll have this property on the market and marketed within 5 days, like in MLS. So realize that's a fast turnaround, because if we're going to have professional photography, you know, if you're at their house on day one, or if the next day is day one and you're moving forward, that's a fast turnaround to get pictures and get it on the market right away. So you might need to check that extra box, the second box of the listing agreement, that indicates a time other than 5 days from now. And the reason is to make property ready for marketing, or whatever you want to put as the reason, but something like that. So if it's going to take them 2 or 3 weeks or longer, let's just make sure we indicate that appropriately on the agreement. So number 7, we talk about your property prep, but also your seller's disclosure notice. And seller, do you have a survey? And if you do, we also have this T47 affidavit that needs to be signed in the presence of a notary. Now, first off, seller's disclosure. Just in case you need a reminder on this, who fills out the seller's disclosure? Hint, the answer is in the name of the document. The seller fills out the seller's disclosure. I recommend you not have any input on that seller's disclosure notice. Now, all the time you're going to get sellers that ask you questions about it. And let me just tell you, that's a slippery slope, because anytime, if we get in a problem down the road, and by the way, no one ever expects we're going to have problems down the road until they happen. But you don't want that seller to come back and go, well, I just asked my agent and he told me this is how I should fill it in. And you certainly wouldn't want them to provide an email or some type of written documentation to that effect that shows that you actually gave them instruction on how to fill out that seller's disclosure notice. So the best thing to do is for them to fill it out appropriately and do that on their own. Just realize if they do ask you questions, and oftentimes that will happen, you just need to be prepared for how do you navigate through that, because this is their disclosure. You don't know this property like they do, so they need to fill it out. But you do also, you need to give them a little bit of sense of the gravity of that situation. And normally what I would do is I would say something like, oh, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you may want to know that the majority of lawsuits that happen in real estate, they all evolve from some type of disclosure issue that a buyer feels like a seller did not disclose something appropriately. So just realize as you're filling that out, I want you to be thorough and not set yourself up for a negative situation down the road. So give them that, but that's their homework, and I would give them a timeline. Now, this is where, like I told you earlier, if I was baking cookies right now and I'm giving you my cookie recipe, my recipe might look different than yours. But on that seller's disclosure notice, what I personally would prefer is I give this to them. I want them to get it back to me quickly. Now, we all know a seller with no interruptions and no distractions should be able to fill that out in like 30 minutes or so. Now, I know sometimes they may have to go do a little homework and go find some stuff, but to accurately fill it out. So maybe it takes them a day or so, but it certainly shouldn't take a week or longer to get that filled out. So what I would always tell my sellers is, let's get that filled out because we need that before we go on the market, meaning before it's an active listing in MLS. Now, do we need that? Is that a requirement that MLS or that MetroTex puts on us? No, it's not. However, I want to be prepared so that as soon as we're on the market, I want to market this property as in the minute we go active and I hit that button and now we got an active listing, we're going to have 20 showings on day one. So we darn well better have that seller's disclosure notice. Because you know, those of you that have been in the business for a while, you know there's nothing more frustrating as a listing agent is to have people asking you for things and you're still trying to get it from your seller who's very slow to follow your instructions. So again, I told you earlier about my little tests, about how I test my clients with technology, how quickly when I send them an IBS or a listing agreement or any other type of document electronically, how quickly do they sign it? Do they get it, open it up on their phone and fill it out and sign it and hit submit and get it back to me in a matter of minutes? Or does it take them days or longer to get something back? So this is kind of the same thing, the seller's disclosure notice. How quickly do they get that completed? The survey. You'll also be surprised how many times people don't know what a survey is. Again, keep in mind, that doesn't mean they're dumb or anything like that. It just means they're not a real estate agent. This is not their world. And so, you know, there's things that I don't know about their world, whatever their business is. So I would usually say, you know, if you've got your closing documents for when you bought this house, you've probably got them in a big folder somewhere, or maybe in the last few years, maybe they just put it on a thumb drive or they send it all to you digitally. But regardless, do you remember what you did with all the documents they gave you when you closed? And I'm certain in that envelope or in those electronic files, there's probably a survey in there. And the survey is just a bird's eye view of the house. It's like if we went up in the sky, like 200 feet over your house and looked straight down, it looks like a map of your house. And then we need to talk about the T47, because almost always a seller, you know, they don't know what a T47 is because this is not their business or their industry that they're in. So a T47 affidavit, it's only necessary if they have a survey, an existing survey. So just want to make sure you guys know that, especially newer agents. If they say, oh, we don't have a survey, or we can't find it, or we've looked for it before, or if they say, well, we've got a survey from when we bought the house. However, since then, we've put in a shed, or we've put in a pool, or we've done some type of, we got it on a patio. These things that are different. The T47 may or may not be needed. So here's what my recommendation is. Again, this is my personal suggestion. If they have a survey, we're going to tell them that the T47 affidavit, all that does is it just explains, hey, here's a survey and here's an affidavit. And on this affidavit, we're going to itemize the things that are different now than what was on that survey when that was done. So if they added a shed or a pool or a patio or whatever, we would make note of that. Now, I know some of you that are experienced agents are probably going, oh, but wait, Chip, the title company is not going to accept that survey because you've made a structural change to the property. And yes, you are correct. However, there's also a provision in the contract that says we must deliver a survey within X number of days. Okay, so we're going, even though we probably like 99% sure they're not going to accept that existing survey in T47, we're going to go ahead and prepare that anyway and have that and deliver it on time just in case, because we just don't know what's going to happen. Majority of the time, yep, they're going to ask for a new survey, but let's go ahead and do it anyway. Now, if they do not have a survey, there is no survey to be found. New agents, any agents, you don't need a T47 affidavit, just to be clear on that. So if there's no existing survey, T47 doesn't apply. They're going to have to order a new survey, and then based on the contract, who's paying for it, the buyer or the seller? Okay. All right, moving on to number 8. Now that we've got all the listing agreement signed and everything, we've given them some homework. Now, obviously, it's great to put the sign in the yard and the super box on the doorknob. Get that sign up. Generally, I recommend getting it up as quickly as possible. So maybe you can start getting some sign calls as people come by and drive by and see it. So make sure you're prepared and set up for that. You're going to get your room measurements. Now, you might, some agents will get the room measurements at the listing appointment. My preference is always to come back and do that at another time, possibly whenever the photographer's there, because we're going to have to disrupt the sellers for that. So maybe the agent, maybe you show up, or maybe if you got an assistant that helps you, they go and do the room measurements at the same time as the photos are being taken. But we need to do the room measurements. And by the way, on room measurements, just for clarity's sake, so pop quiz, in MLS, when you're measuring a room and you're putting that in MLS, what do you do about the inches of a measurement? So for example, we've got a room that's 10 feet 6 inches wide. So how do we put that in MLS? I'll answer that question for you. You do not have the option of adding inches into MLS. So you got to round it to the nearest foot. Now, anyone who's ever been in a tense situation, whether legally motivated or not, you're going to find out that if you have a measurement of 10 feet 6 inches, you better call that 10 feet. If you round up and call it 11, and now I know that in a practical world this would never happen, but if you tell them it's 11 feet and they've got some piece of furniture or something that needs 11 feet clearance, I don't know what that item might be, but who knows, but they could come back later and say, you misrepresented the size of this room. And that could happen after the closing, which how does somebody remedy something after a closing? Usually that results in a phone call to an attorney, and we don't want to have that. So if you measure and you've got a room that's 10 feet 6 inches or even 10 feet 11 inches, my advice is call it 10 feet. Never round up. You might think 1 inch, really? Can't we call it 11 feet? Well, I'm not recommending that. I'm going to tell you to be conservative and round down so that you're giving them the most conservative possible numbers on that. Okay. All right. You're going to collect your notes. Number 9 still. We're going to collect our notes for MLS and our property description. I gave you a pro tip there on the notes. Take cell phone pics. Now, you might think, well, why do I need to have cell phone pics? I'm not marketing with cell phone pics. I've got a photographer. The reason I recommend cell phone pics, and a lot of them, is when you're going through the house and you got your little clipboard and you're making notes of all the things you need for the property, for the MLS input, keep in mind there's going to be some things on there that MLS is going to ask you for that you may or may not remember. Common ones are, is it gas or electric? Are there gutters? You know, some of these little bitty detailed things that if you just walk through every single room and you take 3 or 4 pictures with your cell phone, when you go back to input all this information, or again, maybe you've got an assistant or somebody that's helping you with this, you can just give them all the pictures and they can, you know, pinch and squeeze and look at the pictures and they can find out the answers to some of this, because as you know, for MLS, there is a long list of features and benefits that you have to go through. And if you want to get them accurate, you don't want to be calling your seller and say, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to call, I hate to call you again, but you'll have gutters, I just don't remember. You don't want to do that. You want to be professional. You want to have all that information and be efficient and respect their time as well. Okay. All right. Number 10, professional property photography. I hope I don't need to go over this with you guys, but let's just say use professional photography. Everyone searches online first, and it really makes a difference when people and agents don't use professionals. I mean, and it's one thing to use cell phones, but we all, you know, I could probably do a class on bad real estate photography and show, you could see the guy didn't even get out from behind the wheel because you can see him holding up the phone through the passenger side window. He just drives by and everything's blurry because he got a quick shot. That's obviously extreme, but realize that the pictures are what's going to make or break you. And this, by the way, this is not even this one property. Like, I've had conversations with agents who say something like, well, this is just like a little investor property. It's under 100,000 and I don't want to spend the money because that's going to cut into my margin. I get that because we're in this business to make a profit. However, everything you put out there, you're building your portfolio, you're building your resume for who you are going to be. So in a year from now, or 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years from now, everything you've done in the past, first off, everybody can search and find it. And second of all, you want people to understand that, hey, this is your standard. I'm not like those other lame agents out there that cut corners everywhere they can. I do the best for my clients. So anyway, keep that in mind, that that's just a reflection of how serious you're taking your business. Number 12, your MLS data input. I kind of talked about that. Your supplements, so your seller's disclosure, your survey, and T47, I already mentioned. For me personally, those are like going to be minimum requirements. Now, are there times sometimes we've been in a pinch because of certain situations and we went active without those things? Of course, it's happened before, but it's very rare. That's an exception. That's not the rule. Number 12, showing time data input. If we did our seller's data form at the very beginning, we got a lot of that information right there. So we don't have to ask questions on that because we know all about the pets and the hours and the alarm code and things like that. So we're good. And now number 13, we got ourselves an active listing. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so now we're live to the world and we're all over the internet. And then we move into step number 14 there, buyer showings in progress, getting feedback from buyer's agent to the seller. So here's what I want you to think about on that. Do buyer's agents 100% of the time fill out the showing time feedback email they get right after the showing? I'm going to tell you no. And if you're new and you don't know this, let me tell you, I did a buyer class last week and I emphasized, don't be that agent, that buyer agent who does not fill out feedback. Always provide feedback. So let me tell you, there's 3 kind of levels of feedback. Highest and best is number 1, is you're giving great feedback, great notes specific to the property that's there that they can count on. Level 2 is you don't really remember the property that well because you saw so many, but you know your buyers are not interested. So even if you're doing a cut and paste or this property does not work for the buyers, thank you for allowing us to show it. Be kind, be cordial, but you're not really giving them feedback, but at least you're acknowledging, you're not just ignoring the listing agent and the sellers, you're giving them some kind of feedback. And the 3rd level is no feedback at all, which really doesn't count. So as a buyer agent, always give feedback. Now on the listing side, when you're the listing agent and that feedback is coming in, again, this is my recipe, that your recipe may be different. My recipe is always, 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 I want that feedback to go directly to my seller. Okay? So you may feel differently about it, but in my opinion, I want the unfiltered truth to go to my sellers. Good, bad, or ugly, I want them to get it. I don't, you can get it where you get the feedback as the agent, and then you can decide if you're going to release it or if you're going to call the seller and explain it to them. In my opinion, if there's something like, for example, let's say the house has a foul odor. Maybe it looks beautiful on pictures. Everyone's dying to see this property. And you knew from the first time you were in there, because of whatever was going on in the house, there's some type of odor that's going to be a problem, that's going to harm the sale of that property, but nobody can see it because you know what? When you look online, when you look on your phone, we don't have scratch and sniff on our pictures. You don't know till you actually get to the property. And then you get there and like all the feedback is gorgeous home. However, we can't deal with the stank that's up inside that place. And so we've got to have to take a hard pass on this. Now, maybe as the agent, you've already been telling them up front, this is an issue, and they go, Chip, you're overblowing it. It's not that big a deal. But you know what? They've gone nose blind. They don't realize it's a thing. So what do I want? I want all this reinforcing feedback to come to them from people that are not me or people on my team. I want them to hear from buyers and buyers agents. It's a beautiful house, but man, it stinks up in there. Okay. So I want them to get that hard feedback so that it makes it easier for me to say, okay, guys, look, I was willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, but clearly it's not just me. Everybody is saying the same thing. So we either need to take care of that problem, we need to reduce the price, we got to do something, or we're not going to get this house sold. So my opinion is send that feedback straight to them. And then also, you're not also stuck in the position of, oh, I got the feedback, but I forgot to send it or forgot to allow it to go on to them. And you're also not putting your spin on it. So in my opinion, that's the way I roll. That's my recommendation. Okay. Moving on, now we're receiving offers, number 15. So now we're in the exciting stage of receiving offers. And again, it could be that you're on day one and you're receiving offers. Maybe you've got multiple offers on day one. That sounds awesome. It's a lot of work, but yeah, that's awesome for your seller because it gives them some options. But as we know, it might be, it might be 60 or 90 days before you get an offer for whatever reason. So anyway, as you're receiving offers, then we can move straight into the negotiating process. And we're going to go back to that seller net sheet. So if you remember, we talked about that early on the listing appointment, that we were going to give them an estimated net sheet. Now we can give them a more specific net sheet. And this is the one where you might still have a little bit of a range. You may not give them a hard exact number, but really that range, you can really tighten it up now, because now you've got a legitimate offer. We know all the terms and things like the date of closing, because that closing date is going to affect how taxes are prorated, what their actual mortgage payoff is going to be, because now we know what the close date is and when the seller's last payment would be. So now we should be able, I would still give a little bit of a wiggle room or a disclaimer that, hey, this is not an exact figure to the penny, but hey, we're pretty close. We're probably within $1,000 or so of what your proceeds are going to be. So they're going to want to know that. And then let's talk about multiple offers. So you're going to have, at times, you're going to have multiple offer comparison sheet. And you can do this kind of any way you want to. I've always done an Excel spreadsheet. And I'll tell you, my philosophy changed on this a while back. Used to, what I would do is at the very top of the spreadsheet, I would have like maybe the name of the buyer, because when you're on the listing side, that's the only way you can identify. Say we've got 4 different offers, and we're going to say the Smiths made this offer, the Joneses made this one, the Taylors offered this one, and the Johnsons made this offer. So you identify them by their name or some other factor, but name is usually easiest. You're going to put in factors like, what is the sales price, or the contract offer price? How much cash down payment? So how much is finance versus how much is cash? And then all of the terms throughout there that are going to affect how attractive these offers are in comparison to each other. So some factors like obviously the close date. Well, sales price, obviously everybody looks at that. But we talk about financing. Is this somebody coming in with like 3.5%? I mean, they are just sliding in at the minimum they can put down, or are they putting like 20% or more down? Because that might, all other factors being equal, that might make your seller say, oh, well, let's go with the one who seems a little more financially stable. You're going to have things like the closing date. Who's going to pay for a survey? Did they ask for a home warranty? Did the buyer ask for closing cost assistance? Do they ask for a lease back? If so, how many days in the lease back? All these factors, basically, if you'll pull out a 1 to 4 family contract, and everywhere you fill in a blank where you as the agent have to input something, maybe not every single one, but the majority of those would correspond to a variable factor that your seller could look at that and determine if this offer is more or less favorable than another offer. And you're going to have all these things filled out. And now, old Chip, back in the day, I would fill that out. At the very bottom, I would put, here is your net proceeds, or expected net proceeds. However, I've learned since then, and I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, let's flip that. Let's put the net at the very top. So at the very beginning, again, remember, some people love to geek out on the numbers, and some people need to see facts and information right off the bat. Let's just put at the very top, if you take the Johnson's offer, you're going to make this much. If you take the Taylor's offer, you're going to make this much. Give them their net proceeds at the top, and then back in with all the costs and all the variable factors so that they can analyze them and decide if we've got multiple offers. And by the way, I said 4. I mean, there are going to be some situations you might have 15 offers you're having to sort through. And again, your seller is probably going to love that because that's great for them. As an agent, though, this is a lot of work, because that means you're having 15 different conversations. And is it usually one conversation? No, it's usually a back and forth of multiple conversations. So exponentially, the amount of communication, amount of time you're having to put in and help them pick out the best offer, usually it's a lot. But at the end of the day, this is how we earn our money. This is what we do to do our fiduciary duty to our clients. So realize there's a lot goes into multiple offers. So anyway, you want to give them a very easy, concise, like 1 page. Here's all our offers. Let's go through and let's decide. Obviously, if as an agent, if any of those, if I'm the listing agent, any of those offers are cash and they've submitted proof of funds, and at least everything else is solid, the date is solid, maybe they'll give us a lease back if we want, whatever, all the things that we're asking for, that's usually going to be a pretty big determining factor, because with cash, We're not necessarily required to have an appraisal. They may or may not even have an inspection, although if I was the buyer's agent, I would still recommend that, obviously, on both of those things. But on the listing side, my job is to represent my seller, and so that could potentially be a great offer. However, there have been times when I've advised my client to not take the cash offer because of other variables in the contract. So just realize there's a lot of different factors in helping them determine what the best, most attractive offer would be. And then finally, number 17, we're going to execute the contract. We're going to get signatures. Checks are going to get delivered, and obviously urgent timelines. So we're going to spend a second on this right here. So first off, signatures. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my playbook here. If for some reason any of you actually do a transaction with me at some point, I'm going to regret telling you this because I'm going to give up one of my little pro tips, and you might use it against me one day, but that's okay. I can handle it. When I'm in a negotiation, when I've got, I'm representing my client, in this case, we're going to say the sellers, buyer's agent representing the buyers, and they've made an offer, and we've made a counter offer, and maybe there's a little bit of this back and forth. Maybe everything is in writing. Maybe we're just kind of texting out the details and agreeing. Maybe we're verbally, me and the agent are getting on the phone and say, hey, you drop this, you change this, we'll agree to it. You know, there's all kinds of ways you might negotiate back and forth. But regardless, when we come down to these signatures, and you got to think, this is kind of like playing chess. You got to think 2 or 3 steps ahead to set yourself up. One of the most agonizing feelings is to feel like you've negotiated everything out and you've signed the offer or the contract, but you're not the last one to sign. Now you've sent it back to the other agent, and I'll say you, I mean your party, your sellers, and then you send it back to the buyer's agent, and all we're waiting on now is for the buyer's agent, or no matter which side of the deal you're on, the other clients, the other party, you're waiting on them to sign. And here we go, we've had this back and forth ping pong, super duper fast and responsive, and we're like, okay, we're finally making it, we're gonna get this deal done. And then you send it to them, and your expectation is you're emailing it over to their agent, and the agent is going to get it to their clients, and they're going to have it signed in like 10 minutes, and we're going to be executed. And tonight we can all go to bed and sleep well because we know we're under contract. However, my experience has shown me that many times I would send that, whether it was 10 in the morning or 10 at night, and then crickets. Nothing happens. And so obviously I'm in dialogue with the agent. If maybe after 15 or 20 or 30 minutes or something, if something had happened, I'm going to reach out to that agent. Hey, did you get my email? Because what I don't know is on the docs, is the agent the hang up or is the other party the hang up? But either way, they've now got emotional control over me and my clients because now we are waiting for them to take action. And what I don't know is that client also may be working some other deal over here that I'm not aware of, that I've never let on. And now we are very vulnerable because now we've got something sitting out there and we need, you know, we're not executed until both parties have signed. So for those reasons, I always want to set it up as best I can, if possible, for my clients to be the last party to sign, because that gives me more control. And by the way, if you ever do a deal with me, I move pretty fast. I'm careful and I'm thoughtful, but I move quickly, and I try to set up my clients to move quickly. I've explained to them I need them to respond quickly when I ask them for things. And so, because I know the worst, most frustrating thing you can do to somebody is make them feel ignored. Because when they feel ignored, and especially later in the evening, like if we're doing this in 9, 10, 10:30 at night, people's usually by then they're tired. Their temper kind of shows a little bit more. And if we let on the other party that we were going to get something signed, or that we thought they were going to get something signed for us and get it back in 5 or 10 minutes, and that doesn't happen, then all of a sudden, our mind starts wondering of like, what's going on? Why are they not signing? Everything seemed like we all had a deal. Now we don't have a deal. I just want to, then all of a sudden you got all this frustration. So my advice is try to set it up so you are the last party to sign, so you have control of that, but then also be respectful of the other side and get things signed quickly as well. Okay? Checks. So what happens? Who has to write checks when we execute a contract? I know y'all all know this, but I'll just answer that question. Obviously, there's usually 2 checks. There's an option fee check that gets to the listing agent. That's me in this situation, which I deliver to my seller. And there's also a check for earnest money that goes to the title company. Now, I know when I say checks, like every time I teach this, I sound more and more like an old fogey when I say this, because I know there's so many electronic things that people can use now. But a lot of us still use good old paper checks for these type of deposits. So on the option fee that goes to my seller when I'm the listing agent. So another little tip for you, and keep in mind, I have a fiduciary duty to my seller. I do not represent the buyer. I'm obligated to treat them fairly and honestly, but I'm not obligated to protect their best interest. So if an option fee check does not get delivered in time, or even an earnest money check get delivered in time to the title company, if the buyer and buyer's agents are late on getting those delivered, what's the consequence of that? Well, the consequence is that gives my seller some options. So again, rookie mistakes I made in my first year, we would get the deal signed, and I was so excited, I'm the listing agent, and I would say, okay, Mr. Buyer's agent, so where do you want to meet for checks? Because I'm thinking, okay, here we go, let's get everything done, here's the checklist of things. And then I realized later, wait a minute, why am I helping that buyer's agent do his or her job? It's their prerogative, it's the obligation is on them to get those checks delivered. Now, I'm not trying to mislead them or help prevent them from doing their job. However, if I'm representing my seller's best interest, and for whatever reason, the buyer or the buyer's agents do not deliver that option fee check within 3 days, then where are we? Well, where we are is the buyer failed to perform. There's a term called specific performance. The buyer did not perform according to the terms of the contract. Therefore, they do not have an option period. Now, we still have a number of days in the option period, et cetera, but because they did not deliver that and get it receipted, I have no, as the seller now, they come up and do an inspection. They give me a whole list of repairs, just present to the sellers. I can advise the sellers that, hey guys, because they did not deliver the option fee in time, they've got no leverage in this negotiation now. Because normally a buyer would say, well, Mr. Seller, we better agree to this, or we're going to walk. We're going to terminate the contract. But they can't do that now because they'll be in default because they didn't deliver their option fee in time. So just remember, you've got, as the listing agent, you've got to be aware of the different deadlines in a contract, and do they affect you or do they not? Now, I will also tell you, I've had transactions where I represented the seller. The option fee check did not come in time. And I'm not even talking like a day late. I'm talking like 14 days late, something crazy. And this actually happened to me. I was doing a transaction, it's over $1 million property. And so I'm telling my sellers, hey, just want to let you know they did not deliver the option fee in time. Now, I am not choosing to call the agent and, like spike the football in their face and say, hey, loser, hate to be you because you did not deliver that option fee. Like, we got all this power. No, that was not the way to handle that. I don't need to poke the bear and stir up a problem that doesn't exist. However, the agent was just an inexperienced agent and did not recognize that time was of the essence and get that delivered in time. So we just kept that in our pocket. We just kept on rolling, and there was very few repairs they asked for. We kind of negotiated out some things, but my seller knew, hey, we're not trying to be jerks, but obviously if they send us back an insane list of repairs, we're not going to agree to it because they don't have the leverage of terminating at that point. So just keep that in mind, recognizing who you represent and what to say and what not to say to give your client the most options and the best leverage. Okay, moving on now. Now we are under contract. So here's also what I'm going to recommend to you. You say, see, on number 18, send the SDN, Seller's Disclosure Notice, and the survey and the T47 immediately, regardless if it's already uploaded to MLS. Now, remember earlier I talked to you about supplements, and my preference is to have the Seller's Disclosure and the survey and T47 in supplements in MLS, because at that point, they don't have to, the buyer's agent doesn't have to ask me for things. They probably already looked there anyway, but if they didn't, I could just text or email and say, hey, yep, all that's in that's all in the supplement section of MLS. They're all right there. However, I don't have evidence that they've actually received them, that they actually went and pulled those things down. In that contract, as the sellers, our sellers, we have an obligation to deliver the seller's disclosure notice and a survey within whatever number of days are in that contract. So again, my best recommendation, best practice on this is when you're on the listing side, if you've got a checklist of things to do, just always send an email as soon as that contract is executed. I mean, if it's 11 o'clock at night, do this at 11:01 and send an email and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer's agent, I'm really looking forward to working with you on this transaction. Hey, I know you probably got these on MLS, but here's a copy of the seller's disclosure and survey in T47 attached. Now, I've got an email, I've got a paper trail, so the buyer cannot now wiggle out down the road and say, wait, hold on. The sellers did not deliver these items, because you know what I did? I did it as soon as we went under contract. And again, if you'll make that just part of your routine, then you just know that you're always doing that, whether it's redundant or not. And it may be redundant most of the time. But again, when I get into bed, I want to go to sleep. I don't want to like lay in bed and be wondering, did I forget to do this? Did I remember to send that? I want to be lights out, so do this and you'll sleep better at night, knowing you just took care of that right up front and sent it to them. Okay, number 19, negotiating through the option period, buyer's inspections. Okay, so majority of the time, your buyer's going to do an inspection. They may or may not send over repairs on amendment. Most of the time, they usually do. On the amendment, whenever you look at that next time, there's number 7 is a box that says essentially that the buyer is waiving the option period. Now, the reason I'm drawing your attention to that is once the option period is over, in general, like everybody kind of exhales, because we're like, cool, okay, now we've gotten past that milestone, okay, because everybody's a little bit amped up until we get past that. So assuming I've got the seller, we're negotiating repairs, maybe that goes back and forth, and let's say we've got the agreement in place, we verbally or text or whatever, we have agreed, we haven't signed, but we're in agreement on these are the repairs that are going to happen. And let's say maybe there's 4 days left or 3 days or even 1 day left in our option period. As the listing agent, I am going to propose to the buyer's agent, hey, why don't we go ahead and check box number 7 that says that now the option period is going to be over once we sign this document. So that can be included on the same amendment as the amendment with the repairs. And that way, we don't have to sign this today. We agreed upon repairs, but then still have that nagging feeling for the next several days until the option period that was in the original contract is already come and gone. Does that make sense? So we're just going to go ahead and terminate. We're going to close out. We're going to waive the option period at that point, and now we are done. Even if we're done 3 or 4 days early, that's awesome. Again, just everybody's going to relax a little bit and breathe easier, because, and this doesn't usually happen, but technically, if you don't do that and you're on the listing side, you agree to the repairs, you sign it and everything. I mean, who knows? If we still got 3 days left, and then tomorrow something happens in the buyer's life that we don't know about, they could still terminate. And you're like, what are you terminating for? We agreed to all the repairs you wanted. And they can come back and go, well, can't tell you what's going on, but some stuff happened, we need to terminate. Let's just go ahead and terminate that. And usually a buyer's agent, usually they've got no reluctance to that either, because if I'm the buyer's agent and I ask my buyers, hey, they want us to do this, can we go ahead and do it? If they hesitate, as their agent, I'm going to go, now wait a minute, what are we doing here? Why are we not terminating? Why are we not ending the option period now? That would indicate maybe the buyer's agent and the buyers have some unresolved issues they need to work through. Okay. Number 20, the appraisal. It's all caps because that's kind of, unless it's cash or unless it's some weird provision that you don't need an appraisal, that's like everything is going to hinge on that. And by this point, now we are weeks into this transaction. Everybody is emotionally invested. And boy, no one wants surprises at this point, yet they happen sometimes. So on the listing side, what I'm going to recommend you do is go back to your listing appointment in the beginning, and you were gathering all this information, maybe on the data form or maybe on your walkthrough of the house. You were making notes of all the selling features and benefits of this property. When it comes time for the appraisal, as the listing agent, you should be getting a notification by showing time indicating that, hey, the appraiser wants to come and do the appraisal. Now, keep in mind, a lot of times these appraisers, they're not like agents, and they're usually, sometimes they're very quick on that. Meaning, like if it's like 11 o'clock on a Monday morning, they may be asking for permission to do the appraisal at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It may not be a day in advance. It might be within a number of hours. So you have an opportunity, though, to provide this appraiser with the documentation of all the benefits that might give the highest possible appraised value of this property. Now, I don't want you to think of this as you're influencing the appraiser, because that's on them. If they allow you to influence them, that's their deal, not yours. But what I don't know, because of the way appraisals work and appraisal management companies, lenders don't get to handpick the appraiser. They go to the appraisal management company, and whoever's name is spit out is who gets to go do it. So if I'm over here in Grapevine, and this is my listing in Grapevine, and yet I've got an appraiser who lives in Rockwall, And majority of the properties they do are like in Rockwall County and in Dallas County, and they rarely get over to Tarrant County. I might have a little bit of a concern of like how well do they know the market in Grapevine. Now, a great appraiser should be able to figure that out no matter where they are, but I don't know where that appraiser, where the majority of their business is done. I also don't know if this is day one, like this is the appraiser's first day as a fully fledged, licensed, all on his own appraiser, or if this appraiser has been doing this for 20 years and is like the leading appraiser, the best appraiser in Dallas-Fort Worth. I don't know that information. So I want to just err on the side of I want to give everything I possibly can to this appraiser. Now, that could mean a couple of different things. When you get that notification from showing time, you're going to have the appraiser's contact info. It might be a phone call. You're going to have their email address. You might send them an email. You know the date and time they're going to do the appraisal. You might meet them at the property and have a quick conversation. Or you might also, and this is probably the best, is you have all that on one sheet of paper already ready to go. And as soon as we go active, you're going to send that to your seller or maybe hand deliver it and say, hey, when the appraiser comes, we want the appraiser to see this. So depending on if your seller is home a lot, that could keep it in a drawer and just pull it out and leave it out on the kitchen table or on the kitchen counter when the appraiser comes, or they might leave it out all the time depending on if they're like gone all day and they might miss the appraiser. But regardless, we want to give this appraiser the information that's going to help us get the very best value. This is part of, remember the UVP, the unique value proposition. If this is part of your process, you need to add that to your list, because I promise you, all listing agents don't do this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is one of the things that I do for my sellers, because the worst thing in the world is to feel like we've got a signed deal and everybody's happy, and we're just a week or two before closing and the deal falls apart because the appraisal comes in bad. So I would do that, make that part of your process. And by the way, sometimes I have agents ask me, hey, like, I bet appraisers don't like you meddling in their business and telling them how to do their job. Well, let me tell you this, I've never had an appraiser like give me a hard time, like tell me to leave them alone and let them do their job. As long as you're professional and courteous, they will always say, thank you, I appreciate it. Sometimes they'll look at what you've given them, they'll ask some follow-up questions, because you know what they're doing? Whether it's day one or year 20 of them being an appraiser, they're probably doing like 4, maybe 5 appraisals that day. And this is just the next one on the list that they're going out and doing. So anything that I can do to help make their life a little bit easier, I do that. And again, I'm not trying to ask them to give an unfair and unreasonable number. I just want the best number that they can possibly put on that appraisal. Okay. All right. Number 21, we're past the appraisal now. And now we're verifying that appraisal and the buyer financing approval. That's still a date, even though we get past the option period, we get past all the other things in the contract. We still have that, the buyer financing is still a date in there, usually around 21 days or so is usually what we would put on that. And then once we've gotten over all the humps, the buyer is approved, the property is approved, we are like a clear to close. And now we're going to allow the buyers to come in and do a final walkthrough. And of course, the terms of the final walkthrough, what are they looking for? Well, the property needs to be in the same condition as it was the day they wrote that contract. So if there was a hole in the wall when you moved out because somebody banged a sofa into a drywall as they were moving out, and that hole wasn't there when the contract was executed, well, then we got a problem. We got to get that fixed, or we got to find some other solution. So just remember that buyer is going to expect to have a walkthrough, usually the day of closing or maybe the day before. Sometimes, depending on scheduling, it might be a few days before, but usually, most often, day of or day before is when that happens. And then we're closed. And then just make sure you and the agent are communicating clearly about how are we delivering keys? Are we delivering them at the title company? Garage door remotes too, by the way. Those things, are we leaving them at the title company? Are we, sometimes you might have, leave those items in a kitchen drawer and just tell the agent the key is in the lockbox. Y'all need to work that out, make sure there's no hiccups on that, because sometimes, there's a lot of, the buyers and sellers at that point have a lot of moving parts. And moving parts in terms of like moving vans and things like that. They're trying to coordinate a lot of things if they got kids in school. And this is a stressful time in their life. So they're relying on the 2 agents to make those things very seamless. And then once we're closed, get that client review. Take a picture of your seller. We see this all the time on social media. Picture at the closing table or at the title company. But get that review. I recommend getting it quickly because usually their enthusiasm is highest, right? As soon as you get it closed, like every second that ticks by after that, the enthusiasm wanes a little bit, and this just becomes another thing in their life. But if you get that a review or that testimonial as fast as possible, you're going to be in good shape. Okay, so any other questions on this? We're going to do one more little segment, and we're going to talk about some of the virus issues that we're talking about right now. But I've been kind of spitting out a lot of detail. Anybody got a question or a comment right now? I'd love to hear from you. All right, y'all are very smart. I love it. Okay, smart people. All right, so Christy, next handout is that third one I gave you. So this is going to apply to the world that we are in today. And today is in like right now, today, March 23rd, possibly for the next few weeks, maybe a few months, I just don't know, okay? So these are some things, these are part of conversations I've been having in the last week with different agents. And so these are just some ideas for you to think about, okay? Things to discuss with your clients as we're working through all the uncertainty right now. So obviously virtual appointments, there likely will be a reluctance for sellers to have strangers in their house. And right now you might be that stranger. So it may be just the listing appointment itself. So, excuse me, you may have your meeting face-to-face, like exactly what we're doing right now via Zoom, okay? You might do a lot of the conversation up front like this. Obviously at some point, you or somebody's gonna have to come into their house and get room measurements and do photography and stuff. But even though we cannot eliminate the virus and the threat, we can certainly minimize the exposure. And so if part of it is we're having a 5-minute meeting at the house because we did like an hour virtually, that may be more appealing than having everything happen in their house at the kitchen table, going to the restroom, you know, all the things that might happen when you're actually there. So consider using Zoom, FaceTime, Facebook Messenger, Google Hangouts, etc. Just the things that technology allows us to use for a virtual listing appointment. Next off, electronic signing. This shouldn't be a surprise, but we all know that you can use all your devices for things like DocuSign or other e-signature platforms. Keep in mind that the T47 affidavit, that does need to be notarized by a notary, so they would have to go to their bank or to different office supply places. Some place has a notary that they could sign in the presence of a notary. Next, the virtual open house tours, home tours and open houses. So you could do, I started seeing this on Facebook more and more this past week, where agents were doing things like either a Facebook Live. And again, I was teasing with you guys earlier that y'all were all being bashful and not talking on camera right now. You're gonna have to get over that at some point, because if you got a seller right now, there's a good chance they're gonna want you to do something like this to eliminate unnecessary showings. I mean, they know the ultimate buyer. Very rarely is a buyer going to buy a house without setting foot on the property. So they know that's going to be the case, but they may say, look, we don't want to have 20 showings a day. We want to sift through all the people that are serious and all the ones that are not. So let's go and do it. Like, you can either do a live recording, and that's where, like, everything you say, I mean, it's like out there, you can't edit it. It's just like right now, if we were doing this live like I'm doing with you. Or you could use your cell phone and you could record a video and post it later. So you can stop and start and edit it. And, you know, if you're not feeling confident, that's fine too. But just, I'm going to encourage you to start embracing technology and using a virtual mode of showing your property at a new level than maybe you've done before. Then the next section there, sterilizing the environment. So this, I'll be honest with you, 2 weeks ago, I would not have believed I would be standing here talking to you about some of the things that we're talking about, but here we are. And this may be even in the next week or so, maybe even change more than that. I know a lot of these supplies are hard to find right now, but maybe you know people who can help you out. So if you're having showings right now, obviously disposable gloves are a thing that people want to see. You know, the little shoe covers, the little fabric shoe covers that like when you have a technician or some sort in your house, sometimes they put those on. Hand sanitizer, obviously, and disinfecting wipes. So those might be supplies you start pulling together. Again, part of this is to protect them and ourselves and everybody that comes across this property. It's number one, obviously, for protection. But number two, it is a little bit of a dog and pony show. You do want to, don't just leave all that stuff in your car and say, hey, Mr. Seller, I got you taken care of. I got all that stuff out in the car. No, bring it. Let them see you've actually got these tools, because whether you can read it or not, that's going to probably help them alleviate some of the anxiety they're having to just know, cool, I saw Chip brought in all the stuff. He's got wipes, he's got hand sanitizer, he's got gloves, he's got all the stuff we need. So that's going to probably just alleviate some of the concerns they're having. The second bullet point there, listing agent to meet the buyer's agent and buyers at every showing. Again, that's going to be part of your value proposition. I know that's not easy every time you have a showing for you to commit as the listing agent to be there, but I'll be honest, because I know this happened on Saturday, 2 days ago, because I was talking with an agent that did this. The showing was, I think, at like 2 o'clock or something. The listing agent was there early, like 15 minutes early, because the sellers are on high alert right now. They're very nervous. And so the listing agent went through, opened all the doors with his gloves on, turned on all the light switches, and basically told the buyers when they showed up with their agent, said, the seller has requested that you not touch any surfaces in their property. So think of it like going to a museum. Like when you go to a museum, you know, you look, but you don't touch. So like that. And so if the door needed to be open or if something needed to be handled, we're going to let the listing agent be that person with their gloves all sterilized and do the touching. So the other thing, and you see in the notes there, that sometimes what sellers are considering right now is they don't want kids or extra people in the house right now. The only people they want in the house are the buyers that are going to be on the contract. So if you got Mr. and Mrs. buyers, for this showing right now, these are the only people that we want, because these are the decision makers. These are not, you know, love the kids. We want them to be excited about the house, but if we need to be more careful about bringing them in, then let's just set those ground rules up front. And also, you know, the listing agent and the sellers may want to know, hey, have you guys been traveling in the last 30 to 60 days? You know, what's going on? You know, it may seem like a little paranoid, but that's okay. We want to make everybody calm and feel good that they know that here's what the history of the buyers and their agent have been. And then after the showings, have those disinfecting wipes and wipe down everything possible. You know, when you talk, if there was a sneeze or whatever, you know, they're like, hey, we have done our best to sanitize that property after we left. I think we might have a question. Does somebody have a question for me there, Christy? Nope, am I wrong? Okay, I thought. Okay, perfect. Okay, that was just Sheila putting your email address up there. Got it. Okay, so there's that. And then, of course, let's scroll down just a little bit more, or that is the end of it. The mobile notary, just let them know that at closing time, if your parties, if buyer or seller, if they've got a concern about going into a title company, the actual building, not knowing who all's been in that building, you know, right before them, you know, sitting at that table right there in front of them, you know, their elbows and hands might have been on that table. If they want to, I know mobile notaries, they're probably just as busy as they can be right now. So they could meet your client at any location and handle that off-site if that's something they need to do. Okay, guys, I went through a lot of information there, and man, we almost did go 3 hours. I didn't think we would, but I'm passionate about this. I want to give you guys as much information and as much knowledge and help as I possibly can, because I want to help you. I want you to learn from mistakes that I've made, or maybe not even mistakes, but things that I've done. I've done things the hard way, and there might be a more efficient or easier way to do things. And if that helps you out, I want that to be the case. So now, like Shannon, Cody, Christy, we had John earlier. I had like 4 of y'all that gave me a little bit of feedback. Okay, so now, come on guys, let's just drop it all. Let's unmute ourselves. Give me some feedback. Give me some aha. I mean, literally, I am standing here in this training room, this big old training room. See that? Look at that. I'm standing in here like pouring my heart out to you guys in this big old empty room. And I actually feel like I did a pretty darn good job. But I need to get some feedback from you, and I need you to reinforce something that you learned and that you got out of this today. So anyone, if you're a visitor to Keller Williams, or if you're one of our own, just give us a little feedback. What's something that you got an aha out of the class today, or something maybe you're going to try to do differently than what you've done before? A question, a concern, a suggestion. The
Chip,
floor is yours.
I want to thank you for your time, because I'm learning myself that I feel like I get all the hard lessons, but to hear somebody who's been in it this long share the mistakes that they've made, it's helpful, because I feel like I get the difficult situations and I'm like, good Lord.
Yeah, you told me last week about some of those, so I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
We've all been through them, Sheila, I promise you.
But your
All
checklists
right.
are something that I definitely need because it is helping me to keep things in place so that I'll know my own self, the step by step. So that's my aha, because I'll go back and be like, did I do this or did I do that? But your list, which is why I put my email, I need that because I need systems in place, and I don't feel like I truly have a true system in place.
Gotcha. Great. I appreciate that. Okay. Somebody else, don't be bashful.
If you are on here and want any of Chip's handouts, put your email down in the chat function and I will add you to the list that we'll send out after this meeting.
Man, y'all, either I was really good or I was really not good. I don't know. Your silence is not encouraging me. So I think it was pretty good. I'm going to go off Sheila's recommendation. It was good, but somebody else, surely there's something you can share with the rest of the group. This is not about you. It's about everybody else. Sally, I see your chat there. Thank you. Going to use the data form. Awesome. Perfect. Anybody else? Okay, well, we're going to leave it at that. Hey, so I really do appreciate you guys jumping in. So if we did everything correctly, Christy, we believe we've recorded this correctly. So we'll take a look at that and make sure that's the case. And for those of you at KW Capel with us, we'll put this on our Facebook page as a link. Probably we'll do it that way, or somehow we'll get it out to you guys. But just know that if you got anybody else, an agent or anybody that you know that would benefit from this, right now, it was kind of an idea I had over the weekend. I was thinking about all the different real estate companies that are out there, and everybody is kind of challenged right now with wondering, like, how are we supposed to do our job? What is it supposed to look like? And so it occurred to me that some of you that might be agents at different companies or with different brokerages, this might be beneficial. So all I want to do is just share that with you. If it helps you, that's great. Just know that, you know, if you ever have any questions about real estate, I want to help you as much as I can, whether you're with our brokerage or not. So that's it. Hope you guys have a really good Monday. Stay safe. And for those of you in our office, we're going to be having a meeting this afternoon about kind of what the Dallas County ruling and everything was and where that leads us. You know, Mike made some comments earlier about financial institution and things like that. So yeah, we'll be getting the message out on that, on exactly if that changes up any of our procedures. But appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for not making me talk to just this computer in this empty room with just me and Christy. Although me and Christy have great conversations all the time, it was great to see all you guys participate as well. So take care. You guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christy.